Postcards from a Dying World, the podcast. For more than a decade, I've reviewed over 1,000 books that are mostly science fiction, horror, and bizarro. This feed will feature bonus audio I have produced over the years, as well as a monthly digest of reviews based on what I've read each month, plus the occasional bonus material about my own fiction. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to Postcards from a Dying World. I am coming close to my 100th episode, but as time would have it, just after recording our last Star Wars panel, it may be back-to-back Star Wars because Andor finished in time. I do have a David Gerald interview coming out, who is one of Issa's favorite writers. And I just haven't gotten around to cutting that up and getting it ready, but that's coming soon. Before I get into introducing everybody, if you want our Star Wars story and everything, I would go back to our previous Star Wars episode. I believe that's episode 96 of this podcast. And I do want to promote one thing, that this episode will be coming out on the release day of the novel I co-wrote, Nightmare City, with Anthony Trevino. So that's for sale now on Amazon, and I gotta promote it right now. The way I pitched this book to Anthony was that I wanted to write The Wire if Philip K. Dick and Clive Barker were on the writing staff. It's the way I suggested the start of this. So it's a sci-fi horror hybrid about systematic racism in America, but with a little bit of cli-fi and cyberpunk involved. So we're really proud of it. So Nightmare City is out there on Amazon right now, attached to my name, and I'll put a link in the show notes. So and then next summer, I have a book out called The Last Night to Kill Nazis. But if you can't wait for Nazi killing, I've got a systematic racism horror novel for you. All right. So my panel today are the same guests that I had on the last Star Wars episode. But since people might be coming here just for Andor content, let's make sure to tell everybody who you are and what you do. Starting with Ryan J. Downey. Tell the folks who you are and what you do.
Is it fair to call us your Jedi Council at this point?
Yes, I haven't made you guys masters yet, but you are on the council.
How can we be on the council?
Andor doesn't need a Jedi Council. There's no Jedi.
There's a Kyber crystal in Andor.
There may be a Jedi in the show. We're just not.
I don't like that theory. We'll get into it.
All right, we'll get into
my name's Ryan J. Downey. I'm a fellow Hoosier alongside Count Agranoff. Friends for many years. I'm a writer, journalist, person of interest once upon a time.
Yeah, one of my oldest friends to have been on the podcast. So
yes,
yeah,
possibly your oldest friend to have been on the podcast.
That's been on the podcast. Yeah. I've been trying to get Big John on, but for no reason. Like just to have him be hilarious and be him.
Just if you ever do a Celtic Frost episode.
That would be one we could do. Issa, tell the folks who you are and what you do.
My name is Issa, and I used to think I was a Star Wars fan until I met these guys, and then I realized that I'm just some guy who's seen Star Wars a bunch of times, which is completely different apparently. But I enjoy talking about it. It's still a lot of fun, and I'm especially excited to talk about Andor.
That's awesome. Dawud, tell them who you are and what you do.
My name is Dawud. I administer a Jedi Sufism Instagram page, and I read a lot of Star Wars books.
Right. All right. So that is the Jedi Council for today. Issa's definitely not a master yet. Not yet.
Or I have transcended your whole system. No, I don't know.
Yeah. You are not one with
a gray Jedi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have white lightsabers.
So here's the thing: we're just gonna focus on Andor today, and we're gonna give first our overall thoughts on Andor, and then we're gonna get into like the 3-episode arcs, and then we'll start talking about theories and our feelings on it, and get into greater depth. But And I will tell you, there are a lot of podcasts and commentary out there. I spent a good portion of last night listening to those, and including 2 interviews with Tony Gilroy, which are really funny because there's a lot of contradictory attitudes about what Tony Gilroy was up to and what he was really thinking. And I think there's some really interesting stuff about his involvement in a show that he said was going to have no Easter eggs and then has like hundreds of Easter eggs in it anyways. But I think are a lot of them he doesn't even know about, right? Because a lot of them came down in production design and so on and so forth. But I also just listened to an interview with him this morning where he kind of gave away some clues into some things that are going on with season 2, which they're making right now. And he said, which I thought was interesting, that jumping out of the plane the second time is sometimes scarier. And he seemed to be more intimidated by doing season 2, which I thought was interesting. But I'll go last as far as my general thoughts. But let's start with Bernard Downey, giving your general thoughts on Andor season 1.
Yeah, and I wanted to give just as a note of to give us just a tiny bit of structure as we get started for folks listening who may not be as waist deep in all this stuff. Tony Gilroy, who you just mentioned, being the showrunner, directed several episodes, wrote several episodes. His background is super interesting.
It is.
First of all, his dad, Frank D. Gilroy, was a playwright, screenwriter, film producer, director. He won a Tony Award. He won a Pulitzer Prize. And then, of course, Tony Gilroy himself, he wrote a movie called The Devil's Advocate, which I really like, with Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron and Al Pacino. He wrote Born Identity, Born Supremacy, Born Ultimatum, and Born
Devil's
Legacy.
Advocate is where he started monologuing a lot, Yeah.
That's a very smart thing to point out. That's a great observation. Yeah, and then one of those Bourne movies he actually co-wrote with his brother John Gilroy, who is also a screenwriter and director. Tony Gilroy. John Gilroy is the brother who's an editor, who's been an editor on a bunch of the Gilroy stuff, as well as like Billy Madison and Michael Clayton, bunch of movies. But yeah, his twin brother. It's really confusing because so John Gilroy and Dan Gilroy are twins, and then Tony Gilroy is like the showrunner guy. But one of the twin brothers, which is why it's very easy to get them confused, Dan Gilroy, wrote about half of the episodes on this. He also was one of the many writers who did a pass on the aborted Superman Lives movie. He's in the Superman Lives documentary.
And he wrote and directed the amazing film Nightcrawler.
Yes, the Jake Gyllenhaal movie. Yeah, he was a writer.
Super underrated movie. Great.
So there's a lot of talent even just in that family. And then the last important thing to note here is that, Solo is more sort of well-known or famously regarded as a movie where the original writing directing duo were fired during the production and replaced. And a lot of Star Wars fans, of course, also know that Episode 9, the writer-director there was, cast aside early in pre-production and replaced. What a lot of folks don't necessarily know is that Rogue One, while it's, credited to Gareth Edwards, the director of The Raid and amazing director himself, it was really apparently Tony Gilroy who co-wrote the screenplay, who really kind of saved that movie in the edit, as they say, and directed, I guess, a lot of reshoots and was a big part of Rogue One as we know it. And I think,
Gareth Edwards made Godzilla, and he didn't make The Raid. I think he made
a different Gareth, huh?
Yeah, you're thinking of Gareth Evans.
Evans, right?
Edwards, didn't he do Monsters?
He did Monsters, which is a great underrated, like low budget monster movie, like or lower budget.
Edit
And,
out my Gareth Evans. But the point being more,
if we get a Star Wars movie directed by him, I would be way down.
that would be amazing. Yeah, and I highly recommend, by the way, Gangs of London, which is the TV show that
I
he's
love
now in
Gangs of
second
London.
series.
Great.
So good, and that's the other Gareth. That's Gareth Evans.
Gangs of
Great.
London, great Cole Meany for you Deep Space Nine nerds out there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
First season. Yeah. First episode.
Yeah, he's
A lot of
great
Cole Meany.
in a small role in that.
But anyway, so
great
important to
background.
note that he not only was one of the two writers credited with Rogue One, but uncredited with really kind of being, I guess, a second director, you could say.
He did all the reshoots.
They managed to, I guess PR wise, maybe because the movie was just so much better and was better received than Solo, or certainly Episode 9. There's less made about the fact that it really was totally changed and fixed midway through. But anyway, yeah. So going into Andor, I mean, it's really the Disney Plus Star Wars series that arrived with the least fanfare. I found that a lot of casual Star Wars fans who I know didn't even realize that it was happening at all. And maybe it's the low expectations, the lack of pressure, for whatever reason, it seems like it's the best received, certainly from a critical perspective. People are really, really loving the show. I'm one of them. It was a great character from Rogue One who I think deserved the prequel treatment. So they've really anchored it around someone cool. And, Dawud, you'll know more about this because you know more about the extended canon than the rest of us, but this is really, for a long time people were saying Rogue One was going to be this big experiment because it would be Star Wars without Jedi and without Sith and Star Wars without a lightsaber. And then they chickened out at some point late in the process and were like, actually, let's have Darth Vader be Jason Voorhees at the end of the movie and get out his lightsaber and kill a bunch of rebels.
The Downey cheat as well.
Downey and
that was a pretty big cheat.
Which was sort of, because he's not really a Force user and he doesn't have a lightsaber. He's not a Jedi.
He's totally a Force user. He's totally a Force user.
Yeah,
he would have been a Jedi.
I don't think he's using the Force.
Oh, come on.
No, I mean, they actually say in the lore that he wouldn't be able to be a Jedi. Like,
I'm
whatever
pretty sure
he's doing,
he's one with the Force and something.
The Force.
My interpretation was that he was using the Force as much as any of us could use chi.
No. There's a time when he shoots
like a
down a TIE
character.
fighter and and times it perfectly so it crashes into like a gun that's shooting at the rebels. Like,
yeah, but it's not. But you would see that in a kung fu movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna belabor
in
that.
terms of like flashy fighting.
I think we can all agree though that my point being that there's been a lot of talk about having Star Wars someday that doesn't have lightsabers, and Rogue One was going to be that, and then it wasn't.
I feel like the test was more no Skywalkers and no original characters. That seemed like a bigger part of the test than.
This show has managed,
which they didn't really accomplish.
An entire season
Skywalker at the end.
without Jedis, without Skywalkers, without Sith, without lightsabers, and that in and of itself is impressive. People call it like adult Star Wars, grown-up Star Wars, because
Andor is straight up not Star Wars. I will give my hot take when it's my turn, but it could have. That's my hot take. It's not Star Wars.
I'll disagree. Let's have that debate later in the show.
Yeah, it's very smart sort of political drama. There's a lot of character study. It has one of my favorite sort of tropes of spy series and things like that, and just storytelling in general, where you have all of these seemingly disconnected storylines that start to line up as the season goes on, and then all these characters connect, and then they end up in the same place in the season finale. It was really great, and there was a lot of really great standalone episodes, which is hard to pull off with this in the age of streaming with serialized storytelling, where it seems like, in my opinion, Kenobi being a great recent example, that was a show that in some ways tried to do too much in too short of a time period, and the show really takes its time and has a lot of breathing room. I think they were really smart in dropping several episodes at once, because it really kind of takes a minute to get going before you're really hooked. But yeah, it's brave for a Star Wars show. It's arguably there's not much fan service, although there are certainly Easter eggs in the production design, and there are some wacky fan theories out there. But all of us having lived through the time of all the Snoke theories and all the Rey theories and all of that, I feel like it's way, 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 way less.
People definitely learned their lesson.
Yeah. So that's nice. But yeah, general overview is I really, really love the show. Really enjoyed it.
Issa, so you're saying it's not
no,
Star Wars?
I loved it. Let's just start. I don't want to bore you all. Just say the same thing. Wow, Andor was really good. Like, taken as given, it was great. The reason I say it's not Star Wars, and it is more as a science fiction purist, this story could have been told about any franchise, essentially. Like, you could imagine, Foundation. Like, instead of Coruscant, this could have taken place on Trantor. Like, it would have been the exact same story. You wouldn't have to really change anything. You wouldn't have the Death Star at the end.
Oh, that's a deep cut nerdy reference. But go ahead.
But you could also have done this. You could have done this in the Star Trek universe. You could have done it in any science fiction universe. It's just some sort of empire and rebellion. Like, is
that a bad thing though? Because I feel like
no. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
That's the promise of Star Wars on TV, right? Is now we can set all kinds of.
I thought it was interesting. I personally one of the most entertaining parts about Rogue One was the Donnie Yen character, and just having that like extra flourish of force battles, fighting kind of stuff. And I felt that was missing from Andor. That, like, if I had to nitpick and find something that I wished there was more of, is some of that kind of fighting, and less of like, I just punched a stormtrooper in the face and somehow that knocked him out, even though he's wearing a helmet, which is always like the funniest thing.
There's already YouTube videos about how you can headbutt someone in a helmet and knock them out. There's literally videos people have made proving that is possible.
There was definitely a scene where someone left crossed or right crossed a stormtrooper in the helmet, and somehow didn't bring their hand. But regardless, so that was my one take, and just I did really enjoy it, but I felt like it was sort of my other hot take was that I hate that Star Wars can't do anything in order. Just make a freaking plan and release the episodes or movies and shows in order. Like, why didn't they release this before Rogue One? How good would Rogue One be if this had actually come out before it and they kind of like matched Rogue One up to it a little more? Like, just make a freaking plan. You've got billions and billions of dollars.
But they didn't know. They didn't know that they were going to connect with, that people were going to connect with this character, and they didn't know.
I understand. It's like, it's like a generational thing at this point, telling Star Wars stories. But it's like how good would it be if we got Andor, then we got Andor season 2, and then we got Rogue One?
Well, one of my favorite things that they did to kind of course correct or retcon, like the fact that they didn't plan this, is that there was some like reference guide to Rogue One where it mentioned what Andor's home planet was, and then they changed it they obviously changed the backstory for the show, but there's a scene where his mother says, "I always told people he was from this particular planet."
Oh, yeah.
And that was the planet in the reference guide. And like things like that they corrected. One thing that should be noted is that they made a pilot without Gilroy. They filmed it.
I didn't know that.
Yes. It's somewhere out there on some hard drive somewhere. They filmed an entire pilot for an Andor series with another plan. And then they showed it to, like, Kathleen Kennedy showed it to Tony Gilroy. And he just said, basically the reason why he wanted to make the show is because he just started like telling her, well, I would do this, I would do that. Like, no, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And then, they filmed the whole thing with Diego Luna and the whole pilot, and they scrapped it because they liked this plan better. And they had the ability to get Tony Gilroy. And I think it was a funny and a very expensive gamble, but what I think Kathleen Kennedy was doing was saying, like, we're going to do this without you. So like, this is what we're going to get. So if you don't come in and do this, we're going this way. And it's a character that he grew to like. so he wanted to have his hands on it. And he said basically that after watching that other pilot, he just couldn't stop thinking about like how he would do it differently, which is a very writer thing to do. So it is interesting to know that that somewhere out there's a whole nother Andor pilot.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew that with Kenobi there were scripts for all the episodes that were jettisoned and that they started from scratch.
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know there was.
No, they filmed it.
Pilot
They filmed it because Diego Luna has talked about like how he's talked about like filming the other one and how like he's much happier with what they did this time.
Yeah.
So like, and he's contrasted that. So two people have talked about it. Tony Gilroy mentioned it because a lot of times they just wouldn't mention it. I mean, there's lots of famous stories like this. Joe Hill's Lock and Key.
I mean, Star Trek.
Yeah.
Completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lock and Key, for example, has had two pilots before the Hulu series that eventually came out, and never got released. And so this happens. But Dawud, what was your overall take on Andor?
I was initially a little lukewarm on the show, and then not anything to do with the show at all, really, but more to do with some people's responses to it by saying, this is Star Wars not being Star Wars. I don't really like that whole vibe. And I did feel like it was moving a little slow. And for me, like, since I have kids that watch with me, they're like getting disinterested. And I'm a little like, I don't know, like Star Wars not being able to really appeal to kids feels a little off to me. But that said, everything comes together really nicely as the arcs close, and everything is so well done. It's just a really well done show, really well written. All the actors are on point. I really like seeing more Mon Mothma. and kind of in response to that idea that it's not Star Wars, it feels to me like some of the older Star Wars Legends novels that did go away from the Skywalkers. There's a whole series of X-Wing novels that are similar in tone sometimes, and focus on characters that are not, at least initially, Jedi.
Well,
there's a guy that doesn't know he's a Jedi in there. But
I was going to say, those of us who read the Legends and were real serious about the Legends novels and the old Legends canon, we're way over that. Like we've gotten into the universe without Skywalkers, and I the Rogue Squadron books were a great example. Another one, one of my favorite series of Star Wars novels is the Coruscant Night novels. I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote those.
It's Michael Reeves.
Yeah, Michael Reeves.
I think,
yeah.
And maybe he did one with Steve Perry.
Yeah, well, it's funny because he did a dark.
They shared writing a lot.
Yeah,
Steve Perry from Journey.
No,
it was a really good book. It was about
SD, and that's why that guy goes by SD Perry for most of his books, because he doesn't want to be confused with the Aerosmith guy. But Michael Reeves, and it's funny because he wrote like one called Darth Maul Shadow Hunter, which is basically one of the Coruscant Night books, but just has Darth Maul in it. And it's actually really, really good because Darth Maul's in it, but it focuses on the Coruscant Night characters. And there's a guy who's like who left the Jedi Order, is kind of a fallen Jedi, who's one of the main characters of those books. And those books are like noir books that are set on Coruscant. And they're very, very, very good. And so that's an example of like.
Actually, it was the fourth in that series was called The Last Jedi.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That he had a pocket universe of that, like sort of within Star Wars Legends, right? Like because he did a couple of Clone Wars books with some of those same characters. I actually read all
those in the year that we will talk about later, in 2012. So,
from Andor gave me that kind of vibe of like, all right, we're moving a little away from the whole Jedi Sith thing. Let's focus on, this is more regular folks, working class folks in the midst of this oppressive system.
But also people who are directly affected by all the Jedi Sith stuff we already know, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing the fallout of the drama between the Jedi and the Sith that we don't often see in Star Wars. I mean, we get the, you get the like Death Star big boom stuff, but you don't get as much like, what is that on the ground for the Sith to rule? And I like that we see this. It's interesting because you see that like the oppression doesn't really, it's not as overt until things start to escalate. I mean, like life on Ferrix, it's just grinding work, right? Like they may have been like that during the Republic.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah, we don't.
Things don't escalate.
How far out on the rim or
Yeah.
whatever Ferrix is, but I haven't looked at the map to see when updated maps to see where it is physically.
I mean,
but
maybe it was a Confederacy world, right? We don't
could
know.
have been. Yeah.
But it's interesting, to see that lens of, like with Star Wars, people are always like, oh, it showed how life could be so similar to how it is for us, right? Like when you go to Tatooine initially in the first movie, like, oh, it's like a farmer's life. This is what it's like to work in a factory. We don't know what the factory is doing, but I like that picture, and I like how we see the seeds of rebellion growing and growing. And to me, it is Star Wars, but it's just a different kind of Star Wars than most people are used to.
One of the Star Wars things that I just have trouble with and never understand is how many people can use the Force, and like why do, like in the original movies it was like, I feel like we talked about this a little last time, but I'll never, now I have more to talk about with it with Andor. But in the original movies it's like, oh, no one believes in that Jedi stuff, that was so long ago. And then later it was like, okay, now everyone uses the Force, and whatever. And now but somehow all these people in whatever in the new starting of the rebellion aren't Force users. Like, what's the deal? Like how many people are supposed to be able to use the Force?
Well, I think at this point it was a very small monastic order of people that were still using it, and then through the machinations of Palpatine, he's now stamped all of that out to where by the time we get to this period in the timeline, I think if anyone who's still any kind of a Force user is like in hiding, and doesn't want to openly be supportive of it, let alone using it.
But like, how does it become like a myth that some people don't even believe in? Like that's
I feel like the only way to sort my headcanon for this, and Dawud might have a real answer for it. My headcanon is that it was already in that like pretty much mythical status by the era of the prequels, because that the Jedi Order is so small at that point, and most people are disconnected from it, right? If you live on Coruscant, you see the temple maybe, but I think most people in the galaxy aren't in the prequel era weren't encountering Jedis on a regular basis.
How many people in Kansas know what senators do in DC, right? Like,
but how many of them know who Kim Kardashian is? Like, I feel like you just, it would be like, okay, this person can actually do magic, we're not going to forget about that. Like that's always weird to me out.
Well, I'm part of it is that like there's so few people who are Force sensitive specifically. Like it's like people believe in the Force, there were Force religions, but not everybody that was adherents to a Force religion was necessarily like able to touch the Force, sense the Force, and use it. And in the High Republic right now, they actually have an entire Force cult that is not Force users, and they believe that anybody who uses the Force is throwing it out of balance. So there's that. Like, there's a lot of different things in play in that universe, right? So, and then at this point in the Imperial era, the Empire has just specifically been crushing anything to do with the Force. So like the only surviving real thing with Force cults and it would be Jeddah before they nuke it.
Right.
And,
now,
I'm pretty convinced those are just monks who are really into the Force, like any.
Yeah, I don't think they're Force users.
I think they're more analogous to like, monastic orders in real life who aren't overtly doing magic.
They're like priests, not prophets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I just
they're not
really
miracle
quickly,
workers.
My overall thoughts on Andor, and then we'll get into deeper discussion. I obviously am pro Andor. I liked it. It's interesting that people would, Dawud, you mentioned watching it with your kids, and I have a student who's 14 years old, who's obsessed with all things Clone Wars, and within the same conversation that I'll have where he'll say, I had a whole situation with my student where he was like, books suck, I hate books. And I started reading Brotherhood to him, the Obi-Wan Anakin thing. Now he won't let me stop reading it right to him. And it's funny because I talked to him about Andor. I was like, are you watching Andor? Just because I was curious. He was like, dude, it's boring. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I think there should be Star Wars. There's Star Wars that's, like the first season of Rebels is a little hard for me to watch, and Rebels got better. But I thought it was a little kiddie-ish at first. And then there's like Resistance, which I thought was way too kiddie for me. And that's fine. And then, it doesn't all have to appeal to me. Just like the whole thing with like, I don't really like Lower Decks, but I'm super stoked for people who do like it. And that's okay. I don't have to like everything.
There's people that don't like She-Hulk, and I understand why. I thought it was fun, but that's what that's what these streaming shows sort of allow, is like, okay, now you can do spy thriller, you can do war stories, you can do romantic comedies, like, and Marvel's really exploring that, and I think Andor is a great example of like,
right. I don't have to like Book of Boba Fett. I just don't have to, but I can still be stoked that they're making stuff and that they're trying and they're taking shots. And I thought Andor was a bold shot that was mostly because, and look, they made the show they pitched, because when they first announced that they were doing, one of my favorite moments in the entire Star Wars canon on film, and there was a moment for me in Rogue One that I thought was the fuck yeah moment. Here we go. And that's the moment where Cassian shoots his informant.
Yes.
And when he shot his informant,
huge for Star Wars, huge.
That was because that's a moment where I was like, oh, fuck yeah, this is a Star War. This is a real war.
Yeah. and if Lucas thought Han shooting first was unheroic so much that he had to retcon it, I mean, this is like 10 times worse. This is like cold-blooded murder for like political strategic.
And an ally, no
less, it's
right?
going to be all right, and then shoots him. I mean, it's like there's a lot of things, and Cassian immediately became one of my favorite characters because I was like, it reminded me of the crawl that you were talking about last time, Ryan, where it said there's heroes and villains on each side. And my immediate thought when he shot him, because this is a brand new character, his first scene, I said, who the fuck is this guy? And he is not fucking around. He is not fucking around. And,
but it also, in the story, it worked so well because then it sets up him not shooting.
Exactly.
Really,
things like character and arcs, yeah, exactly. Growth.
Right.
And by the way, I would argue that his character also has a lot of Solo-esque swagger, but from a much darker place, because he's not wisecracking, he's not trying to charm Jyn Erso, but he's dressed kind of Solo. He's very Empire Solo in some of the scenes in Rogue One. And I thought you're right. He was I thought all those characters were great. Honestly, it was a great ensemble of
undervalued in his role in Rogue One. Gary Whitta, the first screenwriter, I think was the one who originally wrote that scene. And by the way, Gary Whitta, underrated. Book of Eli. I love that movie. And Gary Whitta was trying to remake Last Starfighter. Whoever has the money and the rights, give him the money. Let Gary Whitta remake Last Starfighter. I want to see it. Anyways, or reboot, whatever they call it, the reboot sequel. Gary Whitta do Last Starfighter. I want to see it. Anyways, his role is undervalued as a writer in this project too. And he's, by the way, said, and this is a great minds think alike, because I know I posted this idea like a year ago on Facebook, was that there needs to be a Star Wars meets Munich style show with post Return of the Jedi, where they're hunting down Empire war criminals. Like, that would be the next obvious step for an Andor like vibed show. And so give Gary Whitta the money and let him do that.
And by the way,
there's definitely elements of that in Aftermath, I think.
and only because
Yes.
you were giving a shout out to Gary Whitta, we got to give a shout out to John Knoll from IOM, because he was the
It
guy.
was his idea. Yeah.
It was all his idea,
Yeah,
because he was the
please do
guy,
this.
speaking of opening crawls, that was like the original opening crawl from the 77 Star Wars, right? Where it talks about, the spies or whatever that died to get these Death Star plans.
I think
He
it's
was the
like-
guy who was like, that's a movie. And also, John Knoll, along with his brother Thomas Knoll, another brotherly duo, they created Photoshop. So like, what a I mean, not only is Photoshop obviously so widely in use, but it's like a cultural language now, right? When you say like,
Yeah.
oh, Photoshop, it's like a verb, a noun. This dude
Interesting point.
invented Photoshop, which is crazy.
Well, anyways, what I wanted to say is that when they originally, suggested the idea that they were going to do a Cassian show, my immediate thought was the scene where he shot the dude, and I'm like, I want to know how that guy happened.
Yeah.
How
Well,
that guy
we'll get a
happened.
prequel series all about that guy that got shot in Rogue One someday.
Well, not the guy that got
Pulling
shot,
out
the
his
guy that
backstory.
shot him, but I thought that was a terrific idea for a show, but I almost didn't think that Star Wars would be bold enough to do it, and then they did. They told the nasty, grimy story of the guy who just wants to get paid, and then becomes the guy who, I'm gonna murder my informant so I can get out of here, and I'm gonna tell
Think of the
him.
rebellion. Yeah.
Yeah, and lead the
He's
rebellion. and give-
compromised. He's going to slow us down. He's going to get caught. He's going to give away secrets.
Yeah.
It's better. And it's a very Saw Gerrera type move. We see Saw Gerrera as he's increasingly radicalized.
Right. And so, like, for me, Andor was chef's kiss on that. There are some things I would do differently. Like, if I was making it, and it's probably a good thing I'm not, I probably would have had just a little hint of the world that we've seen, like with Force users and all that, a little bit more of it, because I think Tony Gilroy, the one thing that my one complaint of it is that on one hand, I like that Tony Gilroy was like, I'm not doing all that stuff. I'm not doing fan service. Like, just enough to anchor us in the world a little bit more I could have lived with, but I'm fine with it the way that it is. I'm not complaining. Like, I think there's no right way to do it. Like, you're either, I'm fine with it the way it is what I'm saying. But I probably would have had a little bit to anchor us into that.
I would have been really subtle with it if I was doing it. Like,
Yes,
like
exactly.
Why wouldn't a character like Mon Mothma say something like, we've got to do this ourselves. It's not like a Jedi is going to come in and save us or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that would be, like, you'd think people who were around would say more stuff like that. Like,
Even a line where Mon Mothma could blame the Jedi, Jedi arrogance that got us into this mess or whatever. Just just mentioning that this whole cult of knights were out there.
Yeah,
they were supposed to protect us. Would have been an okay thing, and it wouldn't have taken us out of the vibe that
it's just weird. Like, when you think about how in the real world how much people talk about religion, like especially in like in America. Like, I want to draw the direct comparison between the empire and America, but people talk about religion constantly, and best case scenario, you're talking about magic that worked 2,000 years ago but hasn't worked since, right? Like, best case scenario for the religion.
I think the in-universe reason is that the empire is creating a situation where you don't really want to be seen talking about it.
Sure, but think about like how what was China or the Soviet Union, countries that have tried to stamp out religion. It hasn't worked. And so that's,
well, it's worked. It worked for a long time in Iran before it got to the point where we're at now.
I don't know if that's a good example for your side. You know what I mean? Like,
I would say it's working in China, right? I mean,
it has worked in China for a long time. Yeah.
no,
I think Tibetan monks would say that that China's the
They've
empire.
either suppressed it or co-opted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, but it's not like people don't remember that monks or Falun Gong or whatever exist. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, but you're also not going to be walking around openly celebrating or even talking about having any leanings toward any of that stuff.
I would say, especially during the Cultural
now
Revolution, which is probably more analogous to this time period in Star Wars.
yeah.
Well, and I will
guess
say
this
that
podcast can now not be aired in China. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dave. I just
Well,
lost it.
well, I do know that Tony Gilroy resists like talking about real world examples because he says that throughout history you could make all kinds of examples, not just any one. You know,
But it works
If
really well.
there's
say
a
nothing of the Force Awakens poster having to remove John Boyega to be used in China,
right.
or the Black Panther poster where it's got to be Chadwick Boseman in the mask.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I personally feel that the Empire was just very ripped from the pages of America. I mean, that definitely. I don't think you need to go outside of the American borders to get modern.
Well,
Star Wars.
there is a hilarious interview that Tony Gilroy did like the day before the election. It's the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, which is and it was like he was doing episodes. He did all the episodes like in the arcs with Tony Gilroy. So it was whichever one came out right before the election, but it was funny because Jeff Goldsmith kept trying to bring up the election and Tony Gilroy was just not having it.
I think that's good though, because I think it makes it a little more evergreen when it's not so tied to specific current events.
But if you think about it, if Trump were a Sith, everything would make a lot more sense. You know what I mean? Like how if
just
he
for
was secretly a Sith.
Yeah, but for the record, though, because
he's using religion, whereas I think Palpatine is keeping his forceness, like all right, like his alignment with the dark side or whatever. That's not part of the Empire. They're not. It's not a Sith Empire.
In the Empire
Secular
of Andor,
Empire.
in the Society of Andor, no one knows that the leader is a Sith.
Right.
They just think he's keeping them safe or whatever, right? So I'm just making the comparison. If Trump were secretly a Sith, how would we know the difference, right? Like it would be no. I mean, I'm serious.
But Trump's pretending to have religion, whereas I think the Emperor is pretending to be is religious but pretending to be secular.
Does Trump really?
I think Trump is secular but pretending to be religious.
Yeah, he doesn't pretend very hard. I don't think, but
not very hard.
No.
No.
But yeah,
I do think Andor. This brings up a great point though in terms of real world analogies. I think this is probably, since the 1977 original, Andor is probably the most space Nazi the Empire's ever been. Like they are space Nazis in this. First of all, not only do you not see alien races in the Empire, you don't even really see them in the prison. You know, it's like it's very space Nazi, I think, in that sense. And how we also have like gulags and work camps and secret police. The whole secret police element, I think, is very space Nazi, very Soviet Union. You know, I don't know. I feel like it's more sort of on the nose than it's been in a long time.
I feel like that's sort of like, you know, for me, like I thought the prison, just to jump to the prison scene, I felt that was very, I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever worked like retail in the holiday season or whatever, but that's pretty much what it feels like, you know, like I don't want to take anything away from people stuck in actual work, you know, prison forced labor, but like the American thing of like, you know, you have to do your job to a certain quota and you'd be punished if you don't. And you're one paycheck away from like being homeless and whatever, and don't get sick. You know,
I mean, there's definitely something to be said for the idea that you're unknowingly constructing the instrument of your eventual demise.
Yeah, totally. So I thought it was America all the way, all around. I thought it was brilliant. You know, whatever.
We'll come back to prison. Let's talk about that first arc because I think that they're very specific. And I think, you know, there's been some talk that maybe what they should have done was released the 3 episode arcs one at a time, like they did the first 3. So you get a complete story. I know, Issa, you believe that they should all be released at once. But here's the thing. And as a person who doesn't like binging, that's like, then it gave us like an 8-week experience with Andor. And so I appreciate that because I just think that's better. I mean, look at Stranger Things comes and goes so fucking fast, and then people forget about it. And like, I think the difference between where you're having week to week and you're having, and that could be with like, I don't know if I know Issa, you don't do this stuff, and Dawud, I don't know if you do, and I know Ryan watches all the Easter egg videos with me, like that I do with all this stuff, and specifically, I think Screen Crush does the best ones, but you know, and there's one that I was actually planning to reference when we get to it later that Screen Crush did that I thought was a really, really good translation of an episode where I thought people who don't like Andor could have watched it and seen like, aha, and this is why you're not getting it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But the first arc is where we really get introduced to, it was a really interesting one because it's funny. One of the things that Tony Gilroy said he wanted to do is he wanted to explain Diego Luna's accent, that just for him, he just wanted to know why he had an accent. And he said that first arc, a lot of it was like, I wanted to know where he came from. And I loved that they didn't put subtitles on the characters on his home world when they spoke whatever language they did, you know, that they didn't subtitle it. You were just you had to figure it out. And it worked better than it did in the holiday special for sure. But I liked that, and I liked the whole backstory that we learned about Marva and Clem, and that, you know, he ended up on this other world, and and it introduced Ferrex, and we started with the kind of the symmetry. I know they on Screen Crush they always make fun of the whole George Lucas saying it rhymes.
It's like poetry, it rhymes.
It's like poetry, it rhymes, and because him shooting the corporate officers is supposed to kind of rhyme with the beginning of Rogue One, so it's starting his journey on a similar note, and then we're going back from there. And I know some people made a lot about how cyberpunk that planet was, and I, you know, to me, whatever, that first arc where you know, I thought was great character building, and you know, and it all built up to, wasn't the third one where you know, he kind of had to escape off the planet, and then you had that first battle where all the people on Ferrex are banging the pipes, and that was like such a Sergio Leone masterclass in using sound to build tension. I fucking loved it. I love that arc. So, and especially the third episode, and I thought it did a really good job of, for me, it hooked me on the whole show.
And those first three were all written by Tony Gilroy.
Yeah.
And they all, it's interesting, you know, that arc also was like, and this is probably part of what you're doing here with this structure, right? Because a lot of these arcs did work this way. Same director, same writer on those first three. A guy named Toby Haynes did those first three. He's directed Doctor Who, Black Mirror, Sherlock. So that might even explain why there's a certain feel to each arc, and that it sort of changes, because then the next three were all written by Dan Gilroy and all directed by Susanna White. So yeah, it's interesting how it worked that way. It doesn't stick that way through all 12, but the first three and then the next three are like that.
Yeah. And
I was really impressed with how different the segments of the show were. You know, like it was almost like they all could have been their own movie. Which
and all the prison episodes were written by Bo Willimon, I think it's pronounced. But he was the showrunner for the first 4 seasons of House of Cards, which is interesting that the political drama guy did the prison episodes.
And Tony Gilroy gave some insight into that in one of the interviews I listened to. He talked about how they built the whole prison storyline in the writer's room, that arc more so than the other ones, that they spent a lot of time arguing, debating, and writing on whiteboards about the whole prison arc. And part of it is that they were debating it. And it's funny because he talked about how they built things, you know, like for a long time, they spent a lot of time planning the escape based on the boots. And, you know, and it's clear that they kind of set that up with the boots, but then we're like, and he literally in one of the interviews he said eventually we were just like, fuck the boots. I'm tired of talking about the boots. And so when they started writing that whole arc, they were sitting in the room. They didn't know how he was going to escape. And like he said that it was after looking at some of the production designs, they saw like the tunnels that they came up with a sign language thing after they had written a whole other version of it. And they went back and added that because after seeing the production design, they were like, oh, how the hell are they communicating? And so he was basically saying that prison arc was the one that was most written and rewritten and done they did several versions of it. So, which is interesting.
It was really good. Like I was very impressed with that part kind of more than, I mean, the whole show was fantastic, but that part was a level that went to the next level in a way that like, you know, I don't know if we're ready to talk about the prison episodes yet, but
not quite because
we haven't done the heist arc, but
we haven't done the heist arc,
and prison's the most memorable for sure.
The one thing that I will say, I actually really like the heist arc, but more so than most people. But the first three, the arc, that's what Tony Gilroy went and wrote to after his meeting with Kathleen Kennedy. He just wrote a treatment for those 3 episodes. And that's what he took to Kathleen Kennedy. And so everything after that first 3 arc was built in the writer's room when they put together a team of writers. So, but the first 3 Tony Gilroy wrote, like just from after his meeting with Kathleen Kennedy, who of course has been fired and has nothing to do with anything that's good, right? And I'm being sarcastic because I am pro Kathleen Kennedy personally.
Of course, and it's all misogyny. It's people who don't want a lady boss. Period. Yeah. You know,
they want to blame her for all the problems and none of the good stuff.
Scapegoating, and it's also like just because there's someone at the top doesn't mean there aren't multiple other people. I mean, it's so lazy. It's reductive and lazy to be, you know, to pick one person to hate for everything you don't like. But also never credit for anything you do like. You know, when have those people ever liked something new, Star Wars? And I mean, they all love The Force Awakens. She was in charge of that too.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things everyone needs to remember when they talk shit on Last Jedi and why Rian Johnson will get another bite of the apple if he wants it is Last Jedi came in 6 months ahead of schedule and under budget. That is the only time a Star Wars movie has come in early and under budget. There's a reason.
I mean, they should have spent some of that time fixing up the casino scene. It would have been a much better movie.
Then you wouldn't have the
reference. By the way, shout out Casino Planet. I personally hate the Casino Planet, but it was hilarious to me that they that gets mentioned in Andor.
Well, right, and but here's the thing: Last Jedi came in. But one of the reasons why there's so much supplemental material and canon stuff is they had the time to build that because Rian Johnson brought it in on time. Like, you know, they're having to retcon a lot of that with Rise of Skywalker and stuff like that because they just didn't have the time. And part of that's because they threw out a perfectly good script with Duel of the Fates and, you know, which could have been fixed without Leia, but whatever. Anyways, I'm getting
props for being early and under budget. That's it. That is
props for being early and under budget. And I think Rian Johnson will eventually make that trilogy, and I hope he does.
I think they just really liked working with him too. Like, it was a really good team.
From people I know who know Rian Johnson, he's supposed to be like the nicest guy in Hollywood. That everyone loves him. Like, you know, the nicest guy in Hollywood thing gets said all the time about Rian Johnson. And I think that's why I think a lot of people in the industry were super angry when the fans went after him because they were like, don't do this to this guy. So anyways, but that anybody else have anything else they want to say about that first arc?
No, it was great establishing everything. And it was really, and I think as we get into the heist arc, something that was being planted there that pays off. There's a lot of stuff that seems disconnected that later pays off. Was the manifesto that the budding rebel kid is writing that's introduced in the heist arc, and then I sort of forgot about it, and then it comes back around at the end of the season, and you realize like, oh, that was really important.
Well, right.
I think
And one of the reasons why I loved the second heist arc is because a lot of those seeds are being planted for the revolutionary thing. And then like the episode that's called like the Axe
Forgets. Yeah.
There are so many lines of not just in the monologues that happen throughout Andor, but throughout the series, but especially during that time when Andor is like, you know, waiting to do the heist, where there's just lines that are just really great revolutionary thought and text. And one of the things I loved about that second arc is because one of the things if you read anything about war, or like, you know, anything about doing resistance or rebellions or underground anything, is that one of the most important skills is to be able to be patient and wait, and, you know, like to be able to hide in the woods and watch something for 2 weeks just to know how it works is not fun to put on film, but it's realistic. And it's something I appreciated about it, because I've always wanted to see someone in the rebellion like hang out in the woods for a month and not eat grubs just to be able to pull off one mission, because that to me is resistance fighting. That's guerrilla war fighting in a way that makes a Star War more realistic. So every person that complained about that arc being boring, you're wrong.
Oh, that arc was great. And I really liked seeing the different motivations of how people join the rebellion. You know, like I think this kind of had everything, you know, like it was sort of like you had the people who've been directly impacted, like they killed my family or whatever, right? Which is pretty straightforward. But then you also had like you're a bored rich girl, you know, like who might be very serious about the rebellion, but you know, and that just struck me as very, very realistic, you know.
And you also have the different personality types that are like, you know, I'm part of the revolution, but I'm still, you know, I want to have like a life. I want to have romance and whatever. And then you have like the romantic partner that's like, I'm, you know, all fuck for the diversion of it, but I just care about the mission. You know, the mission comes
she's
first.
way more hardcore.
Way more hardcore, yeah. And it's I also important about the heist arc is it's doing multiple things, right? Because it's also showing us the way that the Empire is gradually tightening its grip on diversity, on cultures. You know, it's like here's this localized culture that has this religious belief, this celebration, their holidays, their way of dress, and how the Empire is really coming in much more so than the Republic ever was, and, you know, doing this like orthodoxy, this cultural heterodoxy on, you know, forcing that on all of these populations, and giving them these, you know, little table scraps, right? Like we'll let you do this, but you have to do it this way, and only this many people can come here and go there, and how they're gradually, systematically stamping that out, I thought was really important. And I also think, going back to that heroes on both sides thing from that prequel crawl, we're getting to see people within the Empire, not just like sort of fifth column, you know, resistors who are double agents, but people that are just bureaucrats and you know, punching a clock. And you know, when you see the I don't know what his rank was or whatever, but the guy whose family is there with him, you know, what's his wife and kid have to do with any of this malevolence? You know, how it really does take a lot of just following orders types for machinery like this to run. You know, I think it's great that we're seeing more and more characters like that.
That's a really
sorry, David. One thing that always bugs me about Star Wars, and it's just like, it's so annoying. They seem to make the same mistake over and over and over, and I don't know why. But they have this like generic primitive culture problem where they like always seem to have these like primitive cultures, and just their idea of what a primitive or different culture is just so basic, I guess, is the only thing. Although I guess that word has new connotations these days. So as an old person saying it's just very basic, as in it's not complicated or nuanced. But it's like they tend to either like steal like from like this is a Native American culture or this is this culture or whatever, and it's just like these are people who live in space on some other planet with some other like be a little more creative. It's always been a pet peeve of mine in Star Wars.
Do you think that they repeated that mistake in this arc? Because I thought that this culture
I thought
was a better version of
the simple religious people that came to the valley to do the thing were just very stereotypical. We're a primitive society. I thought the kids that the origin story for what's his name? I'm so sorry, I'm terrible with names. For Andor's origin story, the kids were in like some like bow and arrow primitive society. I feel like
that was a Lord of the Flies thing. They were
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, that was a little different because the whole thing is that their parents were killed by the Empire and they were abandoned, and they had to.
They didn't say that anywhere, did they? I didn't miss that, did I?
I think you were meant to kind of infer it, like because you see that whole mining setup off in the distance at one point, and I think that their parents just kind of all died, were killed or hauled off somewhere.
Yeah, they didn't come out and have exposition about it where they're like, "This is what happened," but that's what happened.
It didn't seem like it because it seemed like they had no idea what this Imperial ship was, or
because they were all children when they were abandoned. They were raising themselves, and I think. Well, look, we don't need to get into
we don't have to go off the strap.
But
yeah, I think it's a fair point. I guess I'm not as bothered by it. I mean, you could certainly. I guess the most extreme example would be the Ewoks, right? But I don't know.
I think the Ewoks, the Gungans, every single freaking Star Wars race is some budget ass version of some like stereotype or whatever. It's super lame, and I just want to. I feel like I can't be involved in this conversation without mentioning that has always bugged me. It's really weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that, like. Because there's a weird tension between people seemingly living like primitive, almost like tribal hunter-gatherer lives in a galaxy where space travel is common,
right?
And they're butting it right up against the highly technological Empire or Republic or whoever it happens to be at that time.
But that does still exist in our real world, right?
True,
but that's like. Think about how would you replicate that in a space traveling situation, and this gets off topic as just a general sci-fi nerd, but I've never understood the technology of Star Wars. It doesn't make any sense.
That's by the way, doing that other culture thing is a very hard thing to get right.
Yeah, well, we also may as well talk about how Star Wars famously does the like here we have Earth with like all these different ecosystems, and then in Star Wars,
totally
each planet is like, here's forest planet, here's sand planet, here's water planet.
Yeah, that's also hilarious. It's just bad. It's just generally bad science fiction, but that's fine.
The rules are different in other galaxies. Just so you know.
Yeah, I mean, like Aldani is like Scottish Highlands planet.
Exactly.
Mustafar is lava planet.
Yeah, volcano.
So one of the things I do like about that heist arc too is that look, I just wrote a second novel in the World War II mission thing subgenre, and I love Guns of Navarone, Force 10 from Navarone, and this just like Rogue One, this fits into that kind of canon and feels like one of those. And I do really like the way the heist got pulled off, that there were consequences, that not everybody escaped. And I love the idea that Luthan knew that whether it succeeded or not, that he knows the Empire is going to tighten their grip, and he feels like it has to happen, which was an interesting twist to have your hero say, I need the Empire to start being more repressive, because they're doing it death by 1,000 cuts, and I need them to like get pissed off. I thought that was a really cool thing. And so then after that we had the next arc, sets up the prison thing, and it wasn't quite exactly 3 like the other 2, but we kind of got more into, and we haven't talked about the incel character storyline with the ISB, the guy who was the corporate officer.
Yeah, Cyril, that character from the first arc to throughout, he's the one that actually makes me think of the X-Wing Rogue Squadron novels the most, because he reminds me of an ISB agent named Kirtan Lore in that series, who's obsessed with the main character of that series. And Cyril's very much like that, except he's not an Imperial, but he's like a believer in what the Empire's doing.
I'm really curious to see where that goes. I feel like
I think kind of weirdly innocent too. Like, he's a believer in the Empire as an instrument of justice and order, but he doesn't really know what they do.
I feel like he's been really set up to be the guy who gets his eyes opened at some point, and I don't know where they're going to go with it, but it just seems like, I mean, if I was just going the super obvious guess, it would be like the female officer that he likes, whose name I don't remember. Dedra gets killed or something, and for doing something good or whatever, and then his eyes get open and he's like, oh my god, I need to join the rebellion. Like, I could see that being in story, but
I kind of feel like he's going to be the opposite direction of radicalization from Cassian. Like, Cassian's kind of being radicalized towards rebellion, and Cyril is being taken the other direction. Like, he's going to, I think he'll end up being an ISB officer. Yeah, it's poetry.
Yeah, I think he's set up to be. I agree with Dawud. It's the setup to be the opposite. It's like his radicalization in the Empire, and I think that's one of the reasons why they had him be kind of this like nerdy incel. Like, he's writing angry letters about Rose and Last Jedi, and
funny thing, I think like people would want to see him flipped to the rebellion, in part because they're maybe a little sympathetic from getting hounded by his mom all the time.
Right. Yeah,
but like
his space Jewish mother, so that whole storyline, and then I think in this storyline too, we haven't talked a lot about the Mon Mothma thing because it's been kind of like a side storyline. Let's talk about Luthan and Mon Mothma, because their storylines are so perfectly woven into it. You don't really think about it in the ways of the arcs. Starting with Mon Mothma, I like that Mon Mothma is a part of this show. I like the intrigue behind all this. I think it adds so much weight to what she's doing as a character. For those people who think Tony Gilroy wasn't getting coaching on how to fit this into canon, they're setting up Mon Mothma's events in Rebels. So by specifically referencing things that that are going to push her out of the Senate in the events of Rebels. So, it's not Dave Filoni territory yet, but they're flirting with that stuff. And I like seeing, because now what you have is, next time you watch Return of the Jedi, when she's giving her speech before like the fleet, when they're about to head out, you're going to have so much more weight and baggage, because you're going to know about her family situation. You're going to know about, how she had to fool the ISB. And by the way, throwing her husband under the bus was fucking brutal and great.
Well, and we've also learned about her culture, which, hey, maybe this is a sign of progress from Issa's point, because we're getting a lot about whatever planet she's from and their cultures and customs and arranged marriages and stuff. And so we've learned, she's obviously kind of horrified that her daughter has thrown herself into their cultures and customs and is going to be sort of following her path into this loveless marriage to a piece of shit.
And look, I've always said this, that, and not to sound like George Lucas saying it's poetry, it rhymes, but to me, the best stories are parallels and reversals. And what's going on in Andor is constant parallels and reversals. And what you have with, Andor is like on the planet eating grubs and taking this terrible sacrifice, and in the prison and being trapped in his situation. And then here's Mon Mothma, who's a senator, but also very trapped. and also in a situation where she's having to like taking huge risks and taking big swings, including now, and this is the scene that I referenced that where I thought Screen Crush, which is my Screen Crush is a YouTube channel, guy Ryan Erie does these Easter egg videos, and he did one where he took and he does really great, especially for Star Trek too. Easter egg videos, and he did one where he took the scene where Mon Mothma is talking to the gangster character, and he translated what Mon Mothma is saying, but what she really means, and what the gangster is saying and what he really means. And it was really funny because the people who watched Andor and said, "Oh, I had my phone out a lot and I was kind of half watching," and then they say like, "I didn't really like the show, but I was on my phone half the time." That's when I'm like saying you need to go. Yeah, you're missing subtext and all these things. And Andor is a show that doesn't reward people only half paying attention.
True.
Andor rewards people who go back and watch it a second time and pay close attention to these things. And I thought that Screen Crush did a great job of that scene, that part where where he translated what they were saying was awesome. And it was like one of the few times where I actually posted a comment on a on a Easter egg video saying, "Hey, that was really good. I hope people caught what you did," because I've done the same thing. I've written entire dialogue scenes where everyone's lying to each other, and you just have to hope that the person reading it gets it, that they're obviously lying, without coming out and saying it. So I like that about Mon Mothma. Any thoughts on Mon Mothma? I babbled a lot.
I just really like having more about Mon Mothma in general. I mean, everything is amazingly well done. Is it Genevieve O'Reilly is her name? Is the actress's name? She got nothing in Revenge of the Sith, even though she was cast as Mon Mothma in that movie. They filmed a scene that was supposed to be her working with Bail Organa and Padme, where they kind of actually start the seeds of what will become the rebellion, and it gets cut. So she gets nothing but a couple of background shots, and I think the character appears a couple of times in the Clone Wars, and then she gets some stuff to do in Rebels and Rogue One.
In fact, she has like a pretty big rebel moment in Rebels, right? Where she's
she has a whole speech.
Yeah, she's great in Rebels. Yeah, and I think she voiced the character in that too.
She did.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. I care way more about what Mon Mothma was doing than Boba Fett. I don't give a shit about Boba Fett, to be honest with you. Yeah, and Boba Fett's a cool looking toy, but Mon Mothma is a much more interesting character. So give me more Mon Mothma background. I'm all for it. So
okay, I've got to now ask my stupid questions for the person who doesn't know all these details. So why doesn't Mon Mothma know that Palpatine is the Sith?
She does, I think.
Yeah, she's onto it. She does because
I mean, she's tight with Bail Organa.
Or not, actually.
I'm not certain of that, but I think she does.
Knows that either, for that matter.
Why is no one like, holy shit, the Empire is the Sith?
I mean, here's the thing. I think that Bail knows because he's the guy who took Yoda and Obi-Wan into hiding.
Yeah, he has to know.
They no doubt told him.
But
whether or not he told Mon Mothma, there's nothing they can really do at this point. All the Jedi are dead, and the only ones left that they know of are hiding. And one of them's got a little girl who is the daughter of Darth Vader, and he knows that.
Yeah.
So he's not going to make a thing about it. And so they're weak, and all they can do is work in the background, whatever they've been doing.
It's the massacre on Gorman that sets
Gorman,
her,
which they've been talking about a little bit.
They talk about in Andor.
It's not. Yeah, right. the massacre hasn't happened yet, but the whatever it is, protest movement on Gorman.
They set it up that's a cause that Mon Mothma cares about, and then when the events happen, when the massacre happens during the events of Rebels, that's when she goes and gives her speech to the Senate in Rebels. That makes her that she has to escape, and then the crew of the Ghost free her as the storyline. And it's funny because I've heard some people theorize that maybe we'll get a live action version of that in season 2. That's not Tony Gilroy's style, but I don't think we need to see that, but we might see the events leading up to it. But it's interesting to see where they're going to go with that. They're obviously planting the seeds for the Gorman massacre on the show, so they might show us the Gorman massacre. We might see that in season 2, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, honestly, like as far as like this is like an Easter egg kind of thing or a deep cut, but Gorman itself is a deep cut because I think I'm just checking Wikipedia here right now. It's one of those things that was mentioned in
Rebels.
Well, it's from a video game, actually. It's from an old Star Wars PC game.
Okay,
Star Wars X-Wing, and there's all kind so there's got a real history in Star Wars even back before this Disney era.
Yeah. And by the way, Tony Gilroy can claim that he doesn't care about all this stuff, but I've heard at least one interview with him where somebody gave the wrong time BBY and he corrected them and was like gave all this information about, no, that happened 6 years BBY. So before the Battle of Yavin. Wow. So he does actually know this stuff now. So
wait, what is BBY?
Before the Battle of Yavin.
Oh, okay.
5
Yeah,
years.
so the 0 year in Star Wars is A New Hope.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So BBY is...
A New Hope is like Birth of Jesus in the Christian calendar.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Luthan, who is obviously the most awesome character of this show.
Oh yeah.
Luthan is the guy who recruits Cassian and Stellan Skarsgård. One of the things Tony Gilroy said in one of the interviews, he said that Stellan Skarsgård's link to the character was his ego. That he really liked that this guy had a real strong belief in himself, and he said that was the thing that he hooked onto. There's a lot of theorizing about what Luthan is and where he comes from. And
he's got to be a Jedi, right? There's no way he's not a former.
Well, like a fallen Jedi or a dark side user, because we've obviously seen him say and do some fucked up stuff. The Screen Crush things that they pointed to, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, or if I forget anything. But one was when he's going to meet with Saw's people, and Saw's people are like, "We're going to need to take that staff from you," and he's like, "You can't have that staff." The idea is that he's got a lightsaber hidden in there, and there's other episodes where he's walking with a cane,
like a lightsaber. It just was like,
and he has the kyber crystal that he gave to Cassian. But I really hope. I just feel like it would be so lazy if they were like, turns out he's a Force guy. Either way, an ex-Jedi, or it's. I think that a big problem with the Star Wars universe, one of my pet peeves, is there are too many Force users in that in-between era, in that Galactic Civil War era. I know we all want Force users, and so it's like they're constantly, at least they have the good sense to kill Kanan Jarrus, right? And Rebels, spoiler alert. But it's like there's Ezra Bridger, there's dude from Jedi Fallen Order, there's Ahsoka, I think the more Jedi's running, and then there's Asajj Ventress, and then there's the Inquisitors. I get why all this stuff happens, and I enjoy the storytelling that's done with these characters. But I do have this pet peeve where it's like the more Force users are running around Galactic Civil War time, the less important this whole Luke's our only hope storyline is.
Totally.
Well, here's my feeling on it is I feel like Luthan was a fallen Jedi. However, I don't think we're ever going to hear anything about it. I think that ship sailed for him. It doesn't matter to his life at this point. And he's moved on, and he may have flirted with the dark side, and that's part of one of the reasons why he left, and that's why he has no qualms about letting 50 people die or whatever. He's willing to play with the dark side, and it doesn't really matter whether he is a Jedi or not. It doesn't matter. What he is, the person who's starting the rebellion. I think more so than the kyber crystals and all that, the monologue he gives where he talks about the light, giving up the
sacrificed.
Light. Everything he sacrificed, which by the way is one of the best scenes in Star Wars. Like
it is, and I think it would really undermine it if that monologue had anything to do with him having any sort of forceness. I want that to be commit. Finally, let's have something Star Wars that commits to being about regular people who aren't magical wizards, who aren't part of the. I mean, again, that was what was so amazing about the Last Jedi reveal for those of us who liked it, was that what's my part in this story? And Kylo Ren's like, nothing. You're no one. Like that was one of the greatest Star Wars moments to me, which of course was then retconned to totally undermined. Oh, you're Palpatine's granddaughter from a Palpatine clone son and whatever. Like, just let's finally just commit to let's have just regular people who are important.
Yeah, you're never gonna get that. He's totally a Jedi. We're gonna have a lightsaber fight before the series.
Well, my personal feeling is I think personally he was a Jedi or was something like that. But I want to split the difference. What I think, if I was Tony Gilroy, he was those things, but it doesn't matter because he's not now, and he has to go by his will.
Not now, you never were. Is that what you're about to say?
If you're not now, you never were. Right.
He's a Jedi sellout. Wow.
Yeah. I hope he is not a Jedi, and I think it would be much more interesting to me if he was like a forceless, quote unquote, like devotee of the Jedi, who's finding himself in a position where he can't live up to the ethical standards that they supposedly would have set. I mean, whether, it's questionable whether that's even true, given the Clone Wars, they've done some suspect stuff themselves. But I find him more interesting as somebody who doesn't use the Force, who isn't that person. And what won me over to that character was the scene, the scene where he's putting on the character of the antiquities dealer.
Yeah.
That really won me over to that character, because otherwise he's just this gruff revolutionary leader. But the fact that he puts on this whole entire character, and you see, it's kind of meta, that scene.
Where he goes like this to get himself into character. Yeah.
But he also
Such a great moment.
He also
That was
decided.
an improv, by the way.
Right.
Skarsgård, where he did the whole thing.
That was great. But remember, he also decided that he had to have Cassian, and he felt that he could recruit Cassian. And he went to like a ridiculous amount of length to recruit Cassian, if you think about it just for a second. So the idea that he has some sort of force reason to do so really would be a strong argument. Otherwise it doesn't really make sense. Like, why did you pick this one thief to be?
Well, because he stole something right out from underneath the Empire that was thought unbelievable to steal.
Impossible.
Yeah, so I think there's a non-force reason for that. But
hold on, but because we even have a thing where there's a whole bunch of these things that have been stolen, right? They go into great detail at ISB about how there's this whole network of thievery going on and stuff. And it really it doesn't sound that impressive when you put it all together. It's like there's some corrupt people selling stuff.
Yeah, but they know things
like we have to have this guy. He's our guy. Like, I'm going to put myself at risk to recruit this one guy.
Right. Well, and then once he pulls off all Downey, he's willing to kill him to make sure he doesn't get caught. And then, which
that was more like he's our guy for this mission. Now the mission, now he's on his end.
Yeah, you're going to take him. You're going to take him on this mission, and you're going to use.
And
him.
Also, we see if he's now going to become a mentor to Cassian in terms of Cassian the Rebel.
Right.
That's why Cassian's that way when we meet him in Rogue One. He's exactly.
And Luthan expects Cassian to die on Aldhani. He does not expect him to live.
Right.
He expects him to die, and that's like one of the whole things of, oh shit, he made it, he lived, and like now I got to deal with that. And that's the thing, is Luthan's like willing to just kill at whim. And by the way, his ship is amazing. And
of course, that's something everyone's been talking about.
Except for the dual laser thing. That was
you didn't like that?
I love the dual laser.
One of my other big pet peeves with Star Wars is that it's just pure science fiction, the technology. Why can't things aim? Like why don't you have things that can aim? Like they
have whole targeting systems.
Well, do they? They never seem.
Luke turns it off and uses the Force, man.
Well,
an interesting thing about
when his phallic X-wing inseminates the vaginal Death Star and explodes.
The idea that you would have like just two laser beams that pointed straight out, and then other ships would fly into them. makes no sense. Like that's not a weapon that makes any sense in the world, you know? Like
So
you fire a projectile or a laser beam on target and you hit.
Well,
your
I mean,
target.
that gets into sounds of TIE fighters and explosions, and I
But
mean, there's
not
all
even
kinds
that,
of
just
like bad science.
Why don't stormtroopers have guns that can aim themselves? You know, like it makes no sense. Yeah.
Well, there are some sharpshoot. We've had all kinds of retcons to the bad aiming stormtroopers, including the fact
But I
that
mean,
there's a lot of
we
crappy
have like
conscripts.
we have some sort of hyperspace travel. We have anti-gravity, but we can't make a gun that aims itself. You know, like I feel like of those three, which one could we do now? Right? Like one's a lot.
Issa, you're
than the
splitting this hair way too thin.
Yeah. Plus, this was a long
I
time
know.
ago, man. It was a long time
Long
ago.
time
In a
ago.
galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
Something interesting about that scene with the ship, this is another thing Tony Gilroy talked about, is that that scene was originally not in the first couple drafts of the script, but they had spent so much time designing the ship and they came up with all those weapons when they were designing the ship that he was like, I've got to use it.
Right.
And because the original draft, they didn't have that scene. And he also said that he was basically adapting there was a cut scene from Bourne Legacy with Jeremy Renner with a traffic pullover scene that they cut from that movie, that he, in his words, he was adapting that scene into Andor.
It was a
which
great
is
scene. It was really
From the Jeremy Renner Born Identity,
Bourne Legacy, yeah.
or whatever,
that's what he
whichever one
said.
he's in. Yeah.
Yeah. He said that there was a cut scene that he basically, and so I don't know what he meant by that, like how he made it how he used it. I'm assuming it has something to do with the way it was written to cut away with both sides and to show, what was happening. I don't know. But either way, that was a really cool scene. And I did like the ship lasers because it was something new. And that's basically like your ship having two lightsabers on it, which is hilarious.
Or one Darth Maul lightsaber.
Yeah.
And that also gave everybody to make spinning's a fun trick jokes.
But aside from that one section of that scene, that was a great scene. Like I love the arrogance of the Imperials and just like this ship is doing this to us. That was amazing. Like that.
Hey, let's talk about
that ship.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say that ship, the Imperial ship. That is another like a deep dig into the vaults of Star Wars, because that was designed by Colin Cantwell for the original trilogy era. It was a concept artwork.
They called it a Cantwell class.
They call it a Cantwell class, and that ship was used a little bit in Solo. It was redesigned for screen for Solo. And they just ended up cutting the scenes. I think it appears in a hologram at some point, but it's really nothing else than that. So it was beautiful to see it used. And then the way that it's neutralized is amazing, because that's kind of a deep cut reference to the first of the Timothy Zahn novels from '92, I think. Heir to the Empire. There's a scene where Luke uses his proton torpedoes, like he launches them backwards into the tractor beam projectors on a Star Destroyer. So I like seeing the use of that principle in this show.
Right. And Luthan and Saw Gerrera's scenes, we get Forrest Whitaker just killing it with the that whole scene.
And I like seeing Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera sort of almost weirdly subordinate to another rebel, because every other incarnation we've seen, going all the way back to his introduction in the Clone Wars, to Rogue One, to scenes with him in Rebels, he's always like the renegade. He's the boss of whatever situation he's in. And it was interesting to see him sort of defer to somebody else. I think it really, from a character standpoint, really shows like how strong, And I want to say though, because you brought up Screen Crush, and this is something Screen Crush pointed out, Dawud, to go back to what you were talking about, seeing the way that he transitions from playing the Antiquities dealer version of himself to being this cold, calculating rebel leader. One of the great things about this show is, from a filmmaking standpoint, these directors that they've had, from Toby Haynes to Susanna White, guy named Benjamin Caron, and then Toby Haynes again, who did the prison stuff. Like, it's really stretching its wings in terms of like not just the production design, but just lighting, framing, camera work, scenes where the way just two characters having a conversation are shot to imply like this character standing a little bit in the darkness, this character is a little bit more in the light, and all these things that are such a long way from the sort of creative bankruptcy of the prequels, where it's like, oh, two characters sitting on couches against a flat wall having a conversation endlessly, or walking down endless hallways. Like we really have come just a total like
We'll figure it out later.
180 from that, to like actually having filmmakers who care about how much framing and lighting and all that sort of stuff helps with story and character.
It was
right.
really-
And another thing too, the production designer came off of Chernobyl. They didn't hire somebody who had done a bunch of Star Wars. They hired, and I guess this guy was like, I don't think I could do Star Wars, and then had a meeting with Tony Gilroy and then was excited about it, because he was like, you're gonna do some Star Wars, but we're gonna be doing stuff that we need your specific skills for, which I think was Ferrex, and
what's the thing called that Mando was mostly filmed in?
The volume.
Volume, yeah. Thank God we're out of that thing. Which by the way, the volume is way better than most blue screen, green screen stuff. But
do you know why they
getting
invented
out
the
of there is-
volume? Do you know why they invented it? Is because Mando's helmet was shiny, and so they couldn't use it in green screen.
Wow.
Because it didn't work with the green screen, so they had to invent the volume for Mandalorian.
Kind of like you guys know why Luke has a green lightsaber in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, because it didn't show up against the blue sky on Tatooine.
Because of all the blue sky stuff in the opening on Tatooine. The lightsaber
It just washed out.
Yeah. Well, and so on that note too,
also his hand got cut off, and so he lost his lightsaber, so he needed a new one. That too. I don't know if you knew that. But,
oh wait, when did he lose his hand? Who cut his hand off?
it was his father. I don't want to spoil it.
Oh, Anakin Skywalker?
Yeah.
So one of the things about Ferrex too, and the whole design of all of that they, I think, well, I lost my train of thought. I think that one of the things that they've got going on with doing that is that they, they're having to balance like doing something new and different, and that's cool. But also, they also took a lot of cues in the prison stuff from THX 1138.
Oh yeah.
As far as doing that. And what I did want to say about the volume, another thing about the volume, it's funny is that Lucasfilm sold a version of the volume to Star Trek so they could use it, and they shipped all the parts and rebuilt it in Toronto. So it's funny because like Picard, they can't use the volume because they film it in LA because Patrick Stewart won't go to Toronto, right? So it's funny because that Strange New Worlds and Disco use the volume, but Picard does not, right? And it's like a thing of it. But what's really interesting to me, and this is not just me being a Star Trek partisan, but I actually think that they use the volume better on Star Trek than they do.
I would say on Strange New Worlds for sure, because I didn't realize that they were even using it until you just mentioned it.
Yep.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? That like Star Wars gave Star Trek on like essentially what is a real life holodeck.
Right.
For some reason, I just heard Palpatine when you said it's ironic, isn't it?
Well, it should be noted. It should be noted for people who think that there is real like beef between the two franchises. There's not. Like Terry Matalas, who just finished season 3 of Picard, has been like one of the biggest cheerleaders for Andor out of anybody.
Battlestar started off as a Star Wars ripoff. Dave Filoni, very inspired by the Battlestar reimagining. Clone Wars, taking a lot of visual cues from it.
I don't want to get off
Gene
topic,
Roddenberry
but
and
the original Battlestar Galactica was genius, and the new one was only good when it was copying it. So there you go.
Oh, I disagree with that.
And I get accused of having contrarian takes just to rile people up. Like,
Yeah, wow.
I feel like,
Yeah,
I
you're
feel like
fucking
people
wrong.
that
don't-
was the worst one of those I've ever heard.
I feel like
That's
people
just
don't
you're
appreciate.
trolling.
I feel like people don't
trolling.
appreciate how much the new series just copied the old one, and then it got less good as soon as it stopped.
No,
You gotta be trolling.
That's a
I'm
whole
not.
Gotta
I'm
be
fucking
trolling because
serious.
we have
I'm-
nostalgia for the original Battlestar that makes us appreciate it, but it's terrible.
No, it
And the
is
reimagining
terrible.
is like
It is terrible.
Twilight Zone, Mad Men.
No,
Sopranos
I
level.
remember how
Great.
bad it is. I've watched it recently enough to remember. But the new one just copied it, and as soon as it stopped copying it,
You know I am right now. But you know that scene in The Office when Jim is trolling Dwight by he's like, yeah, this new Battlestar is basically a shot for shot remake of the original, and Dwight's like,
we can we'll
Great
talk
Office
about it
Hour.
off screen. But I'm
I have said in the past that the Andor is Star Wars being the retelling of Battlestar, though.
It's a good analogy, but I did want to point out, I started to make this point, but Gene Roddenberry and Lucas were very friendly with each other, and they did not like see any kind of competition between the things. And in fact, Roddenberry was very thankful for Lucas because he felt like he got a chance to redo Star Trek because of Star Wars. So yeah, and you know,
and one space utopia and one space Nazis. I mean, it couldn't be
I mean,
different.
couldn't be any
this
different.
whole
And one's science and
artificial,
one's magic. Yeah.
the whole
Right.
artificial idea that there's like conflict between Star Trek and Star Wars is kind of like the whole thing with like, oh, there's beef between Marvel and DC. Like, it doesn't work like that at all. Like, creators go back and forth between both. Actors do too.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like, they're all cheerleading each other because it only strengthens each other.
Yeah, but one thing I will say is Star Wars needs to have Jeffrey Combs in like 14 roles. And that's one thing that they've messed up on, because Star Trek has Jeffrey Combs playing 14 different species, and Star Wars needs to get on that.
Hey, Stellan Skarsgård is in the MCU, and
Star Wars needs to get on having aliens again.
it's interesting
there's
though
a
how
few
the
there.
lack of aliens in this show.
It's not just this show. Like, it's, I mean, even like the sequel trilogy had a fairly lax number of aliens in there
Yeah, but
very
see,
often.
3PO had
And
a red arm, isn't that?
yeah, I
Totally
mean, oftentimes, like,
read a comic to find out why.
and they also don't like to use, like, lately at least, use like alien species that came from the Lucas era. It's really weird.
All right, so we got to get to the elephant in the room with the prison, the prison section. Of course, I like this aspect. I like it's poetry, it rhymes thing of like that. I mean, it was pretty obvious to me that they were building parts for the Death Star almost right away. It's funny when people were like, they need the post-credit sting to prove that, but like, come on, that's obvious what was happening to me anyways. But and you needed, this was, Cassian's always been just trying to survive before the prison arc, and this is where he leads his first revolution and becomes the leader, even though Andy Serkis's character is the mouthpiece for it. It's Cassian who makes everything happen, and it's his first revolution. That's what Tony Gilroy said was important about the arc, was it's his first revolution.
And the Empire could have left well enough alone, because he was happy to just steal from them a little bit and go live a life of privilege somewhere on the outskirts. But
on the most depressing looking beach resort.
that manifesto probably would have just disappeared.
So one of my only real gripes with the storytelling of Andor was, I realized there's like a long history of people being arrested for stupid reasons, but like Andor getting arrested was one of the dumbest things that a character like that at him as a character could possibly do. Like why was he wandering around? Why didn't he avoid the police situation? It just seems like you be more on your guard and not.
I will say, if I was to rewrite this, the only thing I would really rewrite about Andor is I would do one less prison episode and one more episode before he gets caught. Like, that's the only thing that, writer wise, I think there was one too many prison episodes.
I don't know. I like that he didn't have even a moment to breathe and enjoy, just like, I'm just going to go live off this money I stole from the Empire. I like
but you would also be laying low, right? Like,
wasn't he? Wasn't he
trying
laying
to.
low?
That's
just
what
walking down the
trying to
beach.
do. He was
He
trying to
was-
lay low, and it didn't work.
He was with some he had some girlfriend or whatever, and he was like going out in public and doing stuff like
I think he was like gambling and hooking up with this girl.
basically that seemed like it.
I mean, that's kind of laying
But-
low.
He just kind of gets picked up. Like, I don't need, like, we don't even really know what happened to what preceded him getting picked up. We know it's
I
like
like
there's
that there was
an
a
explosion or
KGS
something.
esque
Look,
droid that was
Issa, you
not K2SO.
You cannot say he was not laying low when his own fucking mother was like, Aldani is awesome. Woo, that was great. And he didn't say a fucking word. He did not say, like, that was me.
He was
I
quiet
did it,"
about that
you know?
stuff, but he was just it's like, you know, if you just robbed some big government installation, maybe stay off the streets for a little while. You know what I mean?
He did. He went to like some weird like resort.
But
He was on a resort.
he was wandering around
Minding his own business.
He didn't go to Canto Bite. He went to some weird, dark, like, cloudy world.
Hey man, all I'm saying, it just seemed out of character and stupid, like for a
He went to Florida.
But he's also not a mastermind. That's another thing to
Yeah,
keep in mind, though.
Okay,
He's
fair
just-
enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just saying, if I ever knocked over an Imperial whatever, I would lay low.
I
I
mean,
mean,
Stellan Skarsgård.
In the first 3 episodes, he just shot 2 cops, and then he's like running around his hometown.
Yeah, but there he laid low and he like came up with a cover story and like tried.
Barely.
Barely, yeah. So I think there's like one, two, there's 3 episodes in prison. I
Mhm.
think there could have been 2, and it would have maybe been paced a little better.
But it
But
did. I thought it did such a good job of just making it seem like, oh my god, this is so hopeless, and the inhumanity.
I like the idea that I actually think that I like how many they did, because I think if it had only been 1 or 2 episodes in prison, it wouldn't have even really felt like he went to prison.
Yeah,
I feel like
Mm.
now we spend enough time there that like he's been in the system, like he knows what the worst of the off the books black ops prisons the Empire.
well, you know how they say, like,
it's not like he was just in and out.
tell me you never watched Star Wars without telling me you've never watched Star Wars. There's a tell me you've never been to prison if you're talking about prison. Like, a lot of times I'll hear people say, like, when somebody, like, they only got 6 months in prison or whatever, and I'm like, you try going to prison for 6 months and tell me that doesn't suck. Because the thing about it is that, you know, and I agree with you, Ryan, that showing some time is good. And that's a good thing, but any amount of, like, look, and this is what you're getting at, Issa, and full disclosure here for anyone who doesn't know that I did a year in prison for activist related stuff. In federal prison, it was a minimum security. It wasn't like the worst situation. However, what they're trying to make a point about here in the prison situation is the dehumanization of prison. And there's a real, like, people don't know to the degree, like, first of all, I always tell the story about when I got out, right? The first thing they did, because I had to fly home to Portland, right? Because the prison I was in Arkansas. And they have a halfway house prisoner pick you up and take you to the airport. And if you are there and you go to an appointment or whatever, they make you sit in the back seat or whatever. And the first thing I did was like hop in the back seat, and the guy's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You ain't a prisoner anymore. Get in the front seat." And it was really important for him to say to me, like, "Hey, you're a human being now," because they don't talk to you by your names. Like, they might say your last name, but they'll never say your first name. And the actual role that prison plays in a lot of this situation is they dehumanize you to a level where, and I always give the example of, like, when my family came to visit me, that, like, you might spend 4 hours in the visiting room and it feels like 10 minutes. Because for that time, you're a human being again. And it's actually the worst moments in prison are when you go back after a visit. They strip search you to make sure you didn't get drugs. And then you go back into the prison and suddenly you're alone again. And you're not a human being again. For like 4 hours, you were human. You know, you were yourself again, right?
Wait,
And,
I thought they were rehabilitating you this whole time.
oh yeah, right. And so not to go off on too much of a thing, but one of the reasons why I know Issa wanted me to talk about this, and that's before we recorded, he asked if this was on the table.
I just wanted to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we're watching 3 episodes.
Part of it is because you and I have
yeah.
talked about it before, so you know. And the thing about it is, this arc is important because the dehumanization of prison is a microcosm of the dehumanization of empire. Period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
No,
And that is, and also, you know, stripping local cultures of their customs and traditions and doing this model, you know,
which they did in
the same thing. Everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's living the exact same seconds of every day. Even that part of it of just, you know, yeah, stripping identity, dehumanization, all those things. And also, I think it was important for our understanding of this rebel character to see that the stakes, right? To know what he's fighting against, that it's not just good versus evil in the sense of, you know, the good guys used to be in charge and now the bad guys are in charge, but really how bad the bad guys can be.
And you want to talk about a prequel making like something better than what it was? Now, you've watched that whole prison arc. Now go back and watch Rogue One and look at the fear on Andor's face, like, I could get caught. I could get put in this situation. Now think of that, of him shooting that guy, is totally different. It's a totally different scene.
Yeah, and just to
because here's the thing, and a lot of people can talk a lot of shit about people who have never been incarcerated and haven't gone through it, and like there's a whole thing about it, but you know, there's a certain level of fear that Cassian gets implanted with after that experience, and having survived it, that becomes crucial to his character. And that is why that arc is so important. Not just that he started being a revolutionary, but because it changed him as a person completely. Now he's gonna fucking stop the Empire, whatever it fucking takes. And I'm not going back to that place, and I'm not being put back in that situation, and I'm gonna burn this fucker down, and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna get it done, and I don't care, because there's only one way out, right? And that's the whole message of that whole thing. There's one way out, because unlike people in real life who have dates to look forward to, and you're gonna get out at this time, and you can just keep your eye on that, like, they don't have that in this arc. So, you know, sorry to get super heavy on it.
No, it's fine. And it's perfect, because just to bring it out of Star Wars for a second, like, I feel like that is pretty much the justice system in America in a lot of ways. You know, like there's like a joke of a trial, and, you know, you get some automatic long sentence, and then, you know, I mean, it was very much, it really captured that. You know, obviously it was very intentional on the part of the writers, but it also, I think they did maybe even a better job than they thought they would. You know, like, I was really impressed by just how well done and powerful that was. I feel like there've been a ton of TV prison movies and TV and movie about prison experiences, and this one just captured like the unfairness and the hopelessness and all really, really well. I was really impressed.
Yeah, when TV and movies like depict like radical environmentalism, it's like the most eye-rolling bullshit on the planet. It's very hard for me to watch. The only thing that's worse is seeing televised depictions of prison, which, you know, it's you know, and look, some of its experience, I've never been in maximum security. I've never had that experience, so I don't know what that's like. But, you know, and I will say that Andor was fairly more realistic than a lot of Earth-based prisons, certainly like Oz or something, you know, or like, you know, Orange is the New Black, where like people can conveniently move around when it's important for the story, and, you know, they're not being counted every day at the same time, and like, you know, all that little shit. Now there is some of that happens, but you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but my feeling is that that it is like a really important role in it, and yes, and Andy Serkis was also a very important character, because to see a character who's like, I'm going to be a part of the system, I'm going to be the cog, and then come to the realization he's the one that's so important, because it's the moment when he's like, oh, they're not getting out of here. We're not getting out of here. I've been playing this system and it's not going to work.
The ultimate, like, the system is rigged. Like, he knew the system sucked, but he was still like, I'm going to just do what I have to do to get by and eventually get out of here. And then finding out that, like, even just dealing with it as best as you possibly can wasn't going to be enough.
Yeah, and then he gets captured and turned into Snoke. That's crazy.
I was about to say. Well, after he falls to the bottom of that ocean and gets taken over by
because he can't swim, so
an oceanic dark Sith ghost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gets mutated.
Yeah, and then what's really crazy is later how he ends up in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
goes through quite a metamorphosis when he becomes Gollum, and then later he's steals all the vibranium from Wakanda. He's in a very complicated.
Sometimes he becomes an ape, a giant ape, and something.
Yeah.
And a smaller ape too. It's weird.
Yeah.
So now that the Andy Serkis podcast is over,
The Andy Serkis cinematic universe.
yeah, exactly. So the last two episodes, the daughter of Ferrix and Rick's Road, kind of make out the last storyline, and it shows the importance of Ferrix and how we come back to it. And it's funny because it's just, that's the weird thing of like, when I hear people, you know, I've listened to a bunch of different podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to is Slash Film, has a Andor spoiler show, and one of the guys, Peter Soretta, who's like a film guy, on it, and he kept saying like he just didn't think there were enough stakes in the last episode, and I'm like, what the fuck have you been watching? The stakes were so huge, and it was all coming together, and I was just like, what on earth are you doing? And to me, like, the way things came together in the last two episodes were really brilliant. And I know, Dawud, you said that Marva became a top 10 character for you in that last episode. Do you want to talk about that? Well, I let out a doggy to pee.
Her hologram message to me was one of the most, I think it was one of the more powerful speeches in this kind of cinema period. Or it's not really cinema, I guess it's television, but anyway. And I think in Star Wars, there's nothing really quite like it. Like, that sort of brings the rebellion and the sentiments behind the rebellion down to the level of just normal, regular people. This isn't a senator giving a speech about an event that happened that she wasn't a part of. This is from a woman who was under the boot, presumably, of both the Republic and the Separatists during the Clone Wars, and then under the boot of the Empire for the last, whatever it is, 15 years, I think.
And for anyone who's studied underground culture or looked at underground resistance and stuff like that, the fact that she was inspired by the actions of her son, and she doesn't even know that he did these actions, is a cool thing, because people who are underground resistance fighters have to risk their lives and freedom for things that no one ever gives them credit for.
Yeah.
And you know, they have to they are the only ones that know that they did these things. And that's a really important part of what happened in Andor that I really appreciated, was that Andor never got celebrated by anybody for doing Aldhani. And we don't know if he's ever going to, I mean, we know many Bothan spies died to get these plans.
That's the second Death Star.
Yeah.
A common mistake.
Yeah. But
how upset is Issa with that correction?
No, I'm laughing because
fuck you,
I've
Downey.
been corrected on that before.
No, I was more upset on a couple podcasts ago. I quoted Wrath of Khan, and I had one word wrong, and I got corrected on it. And I was so mad at myself.
I'm glad that you corrected me on Gareth Edwards, which, you know.
Well, right. I'm fine with being corrected. And it wasn't Wrath of Khan. If I got Wrath of Khan wrong, I'd be really.
I mean, was the word Khan? Because that would be really bad.
Yeah.
No, I said everything was laid waste. Or I said everything was laid west. And it's everything was laid waste.
Either
I was
way.
gonna say, don't fuck it up again.
Yeah.
Now that's what I fucked up when I was talking about Wrath of Khan, because I had made a joke. We were talking about something, and I just, without quoting, saying it was from Wrath of Khan, I said everything was laid west. And my friend caught it, but he said, it's everything was laid waste. And I was like, God damn it. Right.
But anyway,
Anyways,
so you're saying the first rule of the rebellion is don't talk about the rebellion.
Yeah. So, anyways, back to that's one of the things about like underground resistance fighters have to risk their lives. And a lot of times it's like the people in public. It's like one of the funny things about like, you know, the people that would criticize Bobby Seale and all these people from the Black Panthers for things they did publicly. And it's like, you have no idea the amount of times they risk their lives to save people in traffic stops and things like that. And just say like, oh, like, I don't like how he handled this court case or whatever. It's like, fuck you. Do you know how many fucking times he risked his life for that you will never know about? And for me, seeing Andor in that situation and being like, you know, how many times did he risk his fucking life? And people are going to be like, what an idiot. He came back to Ferrix. Anyways, back to Marva Dawud. I really have to take the dog out.
Is this a dog, or did you just not take the dog out last time?
Yeah, what happened last time?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's just to me that Marva is a pretty powerful character. That's really where I'm at with that now.
I have a question, and maybe we can talk about this while David is gone real quick. Did she just die off screen? Like, did I miss something? Like, did I blink and she was dead?
I think she died off screen, right?
She died off screen. I think they kind of telegraphed it a little by showing that her health was deteriorating for whatever reason. I don't think they gave us a reason.
Blood into a handkerchief. That's one of my pet peeve tropes. And
yeah, it was handled very subtly, and I think it was
I was
well.
actually, I expected them to do something with her alive, like she was gonna like, you know, die suicide bombing the place or something. Like I
sort of expected her to maybe go out in the streets and protest or something and draw negative attention from the Empire and get killed. But
I like that the brick containing her ashes was used to smash some Nazis. It's pretty great.
Yeah, that was dope. Yeah, what's that guy's name? Starts with a B. I can't remember his name, but
which guy?
He's like
Badass.
I thought it was a false
big
alarm the first time, by the way. That's why. The second
Cassian's
time she really had to
like
pee.
best buddy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. I can't remember. Basto or something like that?
Brasso.
Brasso, yeah. Dude was badass. And like the bro hug they had, man.
He also has the same name as the fictional character that Steve Martin's character plays in Only Murders in the Building is also Brasso. So like that kind of made me laugh. Like if you've ever seen Only Murders in the Building, like Steve Martin's, like he's supposed to be an actor and his famous character that he played was Brasso. And so like every time they said his name, it made me think of Steve Martin for some reason.
By the way, the actor who plays Brasso did some voices in a couple of different Star Wars video games.
Oh, really?
Not as Brasso, but just
yeah, he was a great underrated character, and his scenes with B2 Emo, which is a hilarious name for the.
That made me laugh every time.
For the droid that like got super sad.
Yeah,
the puppy droid.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of fun little one-off characters. Bix was
and we could do a whole episode about droids in the Star Wars universe and their
ethical treatment.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
There's an essay about that.
There's many.
It's pretty wild. Yeah.
Well, and Solo almost broke it by making Lando a droid sexual person too. So like, just really,
how does that even work? It works.
It works. It's actually, I thought hilarious, and I was
me too. Also, knowing that's the actress from Fleabag, which I didn't know when I saw it. I wish I would have known because it character a lot cooler and funnier.
Oh, and that reminds me, since she's in the new Indiana Jones, the fact that Indiana Jones's whip and the idol from the first scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark were in Luthan's shop is fucking hilarious.
I didn't know that. How did I not know this Easter egg?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
in
they got the
carbonite.
screen
Well,
cap.
the whip is in carbonite.
The whip is in carbonite.
That's
and
even cooler.
The stones, I think, are in the background on a shelf.
Stones
for
from
them.
Temple of Doom.
Those are
and
good
then,
Easter. I mean, because that's keeping a long tradition alive, right? Between ET and
Yeah.
yeah, it's great.
yeah. And
Yeah, I did want to say, like, back in the Luthan part, but like as much as Gilroy says he's not into the lore and all that stuff, like Luthan's shop is just an Easter basket.
Yeah.
the
Like too
Sith
big an
holocrons
opportunity to
and
pass up, like they had to do it.
well, I don't think I think that's Pablo Hidalgo
Probably.
doing that and working with the production design people. And because they could do, like, the production design people would go to him, and then Tony Gilroy has no fucking idea, so that they can get stuff past him. Because he might be saying, I don't want Easter eggs, but then, like, haha,
I mean,
we
he's
snuck this in.
probably like Lucas in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like George Lucas didn't really care about detail stuff like that, but then
Right.
you have all these like reference books from the prequel trilogy that are full of here's what this thing is and that you saw in the background for 2 seconds,
Right. And Pablo, for those people who don't know, is kind of like the guardian of the Star Wars canon at Lucasfilm. He's the guy who
The guy who had to turn his Twitter account private because Star Wars fans suck.
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. All right, so the last episode, some of the things that were going on, I love how brutal that battle is, how it just looks like a fucking street brawl, that it's filmed like chaotically,
Mhm.
that Dedra, when she gets pulled into the closet by her stalker, like actually looks terrified and
Yeah,
like,
when we haven't
Yeah.
seen her show any fear throughout the entire show, it was pretty great.
Or emotion of any kind.
almost. Yeah, and then you see her just like really have to calculate in those moments. That was great acting. Her calculating, like, I guess I should thank you, and her like, this fucking guy, for real, and all in that moment. And then
That was a whole weird
Every
will they
Star
won't
Wars
they
fan
moment.
cell
Yeah,
just
totally.
cheering at home, like jumping out of their gamer chair, like, yeah, one for
right.
our team.
And
I'm stalking you because I'm going to save your life someday.
From a BLM protest.
Exactly.
I like that the Empire, that it was a sign of the Empire, like not knowing, like, that we're going too far,
Yeah.
right? In that moment,
Mhm.
that was a big deal. That was really cool. And then yeah, that was interesting. There was a lot going on in that whole last scene. I love that Brazos used Marva's brick to break someone's head.
Oh.
That was super fucking awesome. And the hologram thing, like, Tony Gilroy, for all people give him about not wanting to be a Star Wars guy, he was so excited about having that scene happen in a hologram. And he
I mean,
said
Wrath
that-
of Khan was made by somebody who didn't want to be a Star Trek guy. So
yeah,
sometimes it's what
exactly.
we need.
Yeah. And so and that's part of the fun of like, he said that he loved writing and directing the hologram scene with Mads Mikkelsen, which was interesting because I didn't know that was in the rewrite. And that he said that he was really excited about working with the hologram, and he loved the idea that this woman had been going to these funerals her whole life, and that she got to give her own eulogy was like really exciting to him. And so that's kind of a cool thing. And then as far as like the end goes, it all builds up to the moment where Cassian walks into the ship with Luthan and says, "Kill me, end it now, or take me with you."
I
don't
saw
care.
someone on Twitter point out, which I thought was really great acting, great directing. Someone pointed out how long of a pause there was between "kill me" or "take me with you," where it was like he was really prepared to just die, because that's all. He's not like, "Hey, just kill me or take me with you," like it, but it's like, "Kill me."
Well, and I like that Stellan
Big long
Skarsgård
beat. Yeah.
that he just grins, and he's just like, well, here we go. And then, it's as the whole thing and being that it's Andor's show, that all came together in that moment. It's great. It's perfect. It's great writing. You know, and it's funny too, because like, and I referenced the Jeff Goldsmith thing, but in the Q&A interview, he always asks writers, like, what's the moment you struggled with the most? And he talked to him about like the monologues and stuff. And Tony Gilroy was like, dude, the monologues were easy. I loved those. It's like the hardest part was figuring out how to get everybody on Ferrex at the end, you know, like how to do that. And then he said that
it was great that they all ended up there, but they didn't all meet.
Yeah. And then, you know, you couldn't get my Mothma there, but you know, he had great scenes with her in the last episode with like her knowing, like exposing her husband and to, you know, using him. And like she's had to accept the trap that she's in by like marrying off her daughter, which, you know, she didn't want to do.
I love how her dumb husband is like, he's not listening to us. And she's like, yeah, yes, that's why we're even having this whole made up fight.
Yeah.
That's why I'm throwing you under the bus right
and
now.
he's like, I really didn't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah. And I'm sure those of us who've been married have all had that time where the partner has thought you did the thing and you're like, no, this time I really didn't do it.
My wife would never make it this far into this podcast, but if she did, I've never had that conversation.
Yeah. But your wife has thrown you under the bus to the secret police.
Oh, of course. Yeah, all the time.
Spying on you. You're a
She's
limo
drunk.
driver.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the last episode I thought was great, tying everything up all together. And so overall, we planted the seeds. Everything else, the second season takes place over a 4-year span. And this show was 5 years BBY. And I think we lost Dawud. He'll come back.
The next season's supposed to kind of rush us through the next 4 years, right? Right up till
the last 4
Rogue
years
One.
BBY. And so I think that like all the story arcs are going to be 1 year each is like the plan there. I know Tony Gilroy was talking about there.
Is it just one more season, or do we know if there are going to be more?
There's one more season.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably good. We wouldn't want to know too many bites of the apple, I guess. So
Yeah, I like how many episodes they made this thing too. I think it
was paid
time to
for.
breathe.
Yeah, totally.
And one thing we do know, I don't know all the directors are back, but I know like one of the arcs is directed by one of the guys who directed Narcos, which was really interesting. Like I know that the scripts are basically written and that they're starting to film soon. So, but it'll be a while before we get more Andor. So, but at least we're getting another season, and so we'll get to see the last 4 years BBY. And I've resisted going back and watching Rogue One again. I watched it right before we started this series, but I think Rogue One is one of the most rewatchable of the modern movies, so I'm sure I'll end up watching it again at some point. But yeah, so Eddie, so let's wrap this up. Like, I don't know. I think Mando season 3 is what we're probably gonna have next, right? Is that?
I think Bad Batch season 2 will be before that.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Bad
So
Batch.
we'll definitely got to get Issa to watch Bad Batch season 1.
I will watch it.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think he can watch that without watching Clone Wars? Or
You
No.
gotta watch all the cartoons, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I feel like we always reach a point in the conversation where you guys are like,
yeah. And again, we can curate some Clone Wars for you, so you don't have to do every episode of every season.
I'll
And the
see if I-
backdoor pilot for Bad Batch is in the last season of Clone Wars.
all right, I'll see if I can convince my kids to watch it with me, but I don't know. Let's see.
well, here's the thing. Can we commit to, if he watches all of Clone Wars, will we have a Clone Wars discussion with Issa?
Oh boy.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to watch all of Clone Wars again.
You know, I'm a busy guy, but I'll try to make some time. for it.
By the way, I have a very interesting way for us to wrap up this Andor conversation with something to throw out for discussion. But I got to get up for 2 seconds and pick up this package off my porch. So,
All right. I'll pause it for a second.
Good pause.
yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
This is the thing I wanted to drop on all of you that I think is a great way to wrap this up that I find very interesting. I'm sure, most folks, everyone's familiar with Rotten Tomatoes and the tomato meter. And I'm going to preface this by saying,
I'm sorry, I believe it's tomatometer.
the tomatometer. There's something about the tomato meter that's a little more nuanced that maybe everybody doesn't know. So I'm going to just go over that real quick. In order for a film or TV show to be certified fresh, not only do the majority of the reviews have to be, it has to be more than 60% positive reviews, right? 60% positive is fresh, less than 60% positive is rotten. But to be certified fresh, you've got to be not only past 75%, but at least 5 of the reviews have to be from top critics. So that would be critics from major, significant outlets. And any film or TV show to be certified fresh, a film in wide release has to have at least 80 reviews to get into certified fresh territory, and a TV show has to have at least 20. And I point all of this out because not all of the Star Wars properties are certified fresh, but just in terms of just regular old fresh. If you go look at the tomato meter and you do Star Wars and you do it, arrange it by the tomato meter, Andor is number 3 of everything Star Wars ever.
What's ahead of it?
There are 2 things ahead of it. One of them I'm sure you can all guess.
Empire Strikes.
Got to be Empire Strikes Back.
Empire is number 2. Number 1 is Star Wars Rebels.
Really?
Okay.
So Star Wars Rebels is 98% fresh. Empire is number 2 at 94, and that is certified. Then you have Andor at 93, Mandalorian at 93, Force Awakens at 93, certified fresh.
Magic number.
Clone Wars at 93, A New Hope at 93, certified. And then it goes Resistance 92, weird. Last Jedi 91, certified, which is strange considering everyone supposedly hates that movie. Bad Batch 86, Rogue One 84, certified. Return of the Jedi 83, certified. Kenobi 82, Revenge of the Sith 79, Solo 69, Book of Boba Fett 66. We're starting to drop. We're getting close to rotten. Attack of the Clones 65%, and then the rotten Star Wars properties are The Rise of Skywalker at 52%, Phantom Menace at 51%, and at the very bottom, the Clone Wars cartoon movie at 18%.
Well,
Where's the holiday special?
It was bad.
My guess would be that there aren't enough reviews of the holiday special to be on here.
Phantom Menace shouldn't be that low with Duel of the Fates being in it, but whatever.
Yeah.
That
one is like
there's a
that's
film
the
podcast, Empire film podcast, and one of the hosts, Chris Hewitt, they never stop making fun of him for giving Attack of the Clones 5 stars. And like whenever they talk about his bona fides as a reviewer, there's one other guy on the show that goes, that always brings up that he gave 5 stars.
That's called. I have to say, on my personal list, it's weird to me that those are all rated the same. I understand that that's not how it works, but I would say that Andor was about 10 times better than The Mandalorian, at least for my personal enjoyment.
Absolutely.
On my own scale.
Yeah, I would say it's the best Star Wars TV show. Yeah. I try to be wary of recency bias. For example, I really loved Attack of the Clones when I saw it the first time. There's kind of the newness of like, yay, new Star Wars. But yeah, I don't
hate Attack of the Clones like some people, but
I don't hate it, but it is
rough.
It's not like as bad as Sand or anything, but
it's the one that makes me cringe the most.
It's the cringiest. Yeah, agreed. Because a lot of what's wrong with Phantom Menace is just that it's boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
If we well, as far as TV shows go, I definitely think Andor is the best one. I might have had more fun watching Obi-Wan, which is interesting. That's
a great way to put it. I would agree with you. This is technically a better show than Obi-Wan, but I've had more fun watching Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole I don't know. I mean, favorite and best,
Yep.
are two totally different things. And it's like, I'm not sure what my favorite Slayer record is, but I know Rain and Blood is the best one.
Exactly.
It's just, I don't know that it's my favorite, but
yeah, we've talked about that, and I agree. And also, I would say that there are scenes in Kenobi that I would go rewatch right now. Certain sequences, certain bits of episodes, whereas I don't have a need to revisit Andor. I really, really loved it. I thought it was great, but I'm not like, ooh, let's go watch the prison arc again. I don't.
I think with Andor, like you can't just rewatch an episode.
Right.
The style that was selected for how to make this, you have to watch at least the 3-episode arcs.
Yeah.
Like,
also, I think time will tell.
Yeah,
I mean, as you said, time will tell on a lot of these things. Like how these storylines play out will really color how we see them. And like if season 2 comes out and is terrible, and all the storylines go nowhere, and it's just everyone's a Jedi, then we'll probably not look very fondly on Andor season 1 or as fondly as right now.
if it turns out like if Dave Filoni made Andor meme.
Yeah,
but
if Dave Filoni made Andor meme is awesome, and I say that as somebody who wants Dave Filoni to be the Kevin Feige of Star Wars.
I mean, I want Dave Filoni to keep doing Dave Filoni things, and I'm cool with it. I'm excited for Ahsoka, right? Like, I'm excited that that's like a thing, but at the same time, like, I want different things. Like, I want Star Trek Discovery, and I want Prodigy, right? And I want Strange New Worlds, but I'm just not a big Lower Decks fan, but but I'm also happy for the people that like it, even though I don't like it. And that's the thing is, Ryan Downey can like Celtic Frost Cold Lake. That's fine. I
wouldn't argue that it's great.
There's a couple songs on it that work.
Got some riffs.
Kind of like what I said about Batman v Superman.
Look, I'll use an Earth Crisis example. Like, I'm fine with Slither existing. I just don't have to. Like, they're my favorite band in the world, but I'm still very rarely going to listen to that record. But there are people who actually like that record. So, good for them.
Much like Load, if you have to forget about the band photo.
That's true.
I'm gonna park my Ahsoka hot take here real quick, which we will inevitably revisit when the Ahsoka show comes out. It pains me to say it, but I feel it must be said because I've felt this way consistently. And this is as someone who watched the Clone Wars as it aired and loved it. I think Rosario Dawson is great casting. I'm excited for the Ahsoka show. I will inevitably watch all of it. I will most likely enjoy it. And I understand why this was done in order to get us more Ahsoka stories. However, I have to say, from a storytelling narrative standpoint, she should have died in Twilight of the Apprentice. It's such a.
You said that in the last episode, and I understand.
When people talk about, fan service. Okay, I did say it before. Yeah, when people talk about fan service, it's like the ultimate in fan service to me. It was such a cheat the way that they figured out to keep her alive, yet a non-participant. Because you not only had to make her alive, but you had to make her a non-participant during the whole Galactic Civil War.
I would just say they should invent a multiverse and have her be a variant version. That would solve all these problems.
There's some people thinking that's going to happen, or they've convinced themselves that. The same people who
that's going to happen to
the same people who say Kathleen Kennedy's fired every day, are the ones that say Ahsoka's going to. Issa, this is like some deep cuts on Rebels that like
a Venn diagram of election deniers.
It's like there's like a whole world called the World Between Worlds now. That's like this mystic world, and like. There's a little bit of time travel involved. So there's people that think there's going to be a multiverse.
I was just trying to make a Marvel joke.
And people who thought Benicio del Toro was going to be playing Ezra Bridger.
Yeah.
Too much time on their hands.
Right. Which actually wouldn't have been terrible casting.
It wouldn't have been terrible. But...
No.
It's interesting that we have a Filoni-verse kind of.
We do.
He is continuing his cartoons like into live action now.
Totally.
And that goes wherever it goes. I think he's setting
up.
It was
like a backdoor pilot into the Filoniverse.
Yeah, he's kind of setting up, I think, like some narrative threads that are going to work their way into the sequel trilogy stuff.
Oh, for sure. Which is the same
with Grogu
same
and all
thing he
that.
did in fixing the prequel trilogy. Absolutely, I think everything with the Camino cloner guy, and with what yeah, for sure, what Moff Gideon's trying to do, and all the stuff with Baby Yoda, with Grogu, and all that.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I think he's absolutely trying to fix the sequel trilogy.
Yeah,
what he's doing, which is admirable.
Yeah, well, more credit to him. And I have a dog protesting now, so that might mean time to wrap up. But my personal feeling on the Filoni stuff is like I'm all for it. Like, keep going, do it. Again, I don't have to like all of it. I just my only thing too is though, the people like I saw it's the guy that does the Star Wars Theory YouTube page, who like he keeps, who's one of the most annoying commentators out there on this. And he was talking about how boring Andor was. And then went on to complain that, that they're not listening to Filoni because this is about the kids. And like, for whatever reason, he doesn't think that we can have Star Wars of different kinds. And for me, yeah, we can certainly have all kinds of different Star Wars. So, all right, on that note, anything you guys want to say? I don't know how soon we're gonna do Bad Batch season 2, so we might have to, we'll talk. We'll recap Clone Wars, but at some point, because this is definitely a lot of fun talking Star Wars. So
and I just wanted to let Issa know that Rebels is the best reviewed Star Wars.
I'm shocked to hear that. I'll have to.
And it's shorter than Clone Wars.
Well,
so Clone Wars.
I don't want to reopen the. I know you're doing your wrap up, and I'm being played off by music here, but I just got burned on X-Men '97, the cartoon, and so people have been telling me for years how good X-Men '97 is, and it is terrible. So
nostalgia.
I'm a little
Rebels. Rebels took me a little while to warm up to. I liked Clone Wars from the beginning. Rebels, that took me a little while to get used to the animation style, and they kind of chilled that out a little bit after a couple episodes, because it kind of looked less realistic than Clone Wars, I guess. And then they kind of like chilled that out a little bit, and then I got used to it, and it got better. But I'm due for a Rebels rewatch, actually.
I'll see what I can. No problem.
So maybe we'll talk about it. But
I'm happy to curate episodes for you to be able to.
All right, I'll try some and then let
like
you
a Cliff's Notes,
Yeah.
So on that note, Issa, how can folks find you if they want to? Do you not want
to? You can't find me. I'm unfindable. I'm on Facebook.
Can't see me.
Exactly. I'm on Facebook, which
you're unfindable and unfadeable.
Facebook is sort of like TikTok for old people, I guess. So you can find me there, or Twitter for old people. I don't know. Does Twitter still exist? Who knows? By the time this thing is published,
Dawud.
You can still find me at Jedi Sufism on Instagram, and that's about it.
You got holiday stuff coming up on Jedi Sufism, like because I know you usually do stuff around the holidays, right?
Sometimes I've dropped a picture of my tree with a special made Jedi logo like topper on that thing that I made. That's about it. But I don't know. I'm working on something in my head, like for to sort of explicate a Jedi code thing. So I'm working on something.
Downey.
RyanJDowney.com is the easiest place to find me. Everything else is there.
Are we gonna get some new Speak and Destroy soon? Because I'm starting to Jones.
Yeah, I've got a couple in the bank, and I actually have a bunch of No Prize from God in the bank. And I'm sure I said this last time, but I need to have Dawud on that to talk Jedi Sufism
Cool.
at some point. But
Yeah, I
2023 New Year's resolutions.
well, nice. I like that you fit in a load reference. That was good. So, the defender of '90s era Metallica, but that you are. And so, if anybody wants to find me, you found this podcast, so you should be able to find me.
You're already there.
Yeah, and I'm finally living up to Count Agranoff. I have an actual Count vampire in the book that comes out next summer. As fully 200% Count Agranoff now. With Last Night to Kill Nazis. So on that note, I have an angry dog who wants to go for a walk. But thanks for listening, folks, and we'll be back for sure for Bad Batch season 2. Maybe something in between then to catch up. But I think we should just get Issa caught up, and then we can review it with him in Bad Batch probably.
Right, fine, peer pressure. I'll do it.
Watch some cartoons, goddammit.
Yeah, your homework assignment is watching cartoons.
Now
I'm trying to get the kids to watch less TV, and now I have to try to convince them.
To get them to watch more.
Now, on that note, before we
Only
stop,
this
though,
kind.
Downey, are you watching Prodigy? Have you watched Star Trek Prodigy?
Mm-mm.
Have you seen that at all?
I haven't.
Oh man, that's
I'm all.
so good.
I love Star Trek Prodigy. I think they nailed the Star Trek for kids thing.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, and I really like the characters, and I didn't realize. I don't know if we were talking about this, but we talked about this in the last Star Trek thing. But I didn't realize how much I liked Prodigy until I was watching the live feed of Kate Mulgrew visiting the Captain Janeway statue in Bloomington, my hometown, that I share with Captain Janeway. And they had a woman in a Starfleet uniform playing the theme songs on flute before Kate Mulgrew walked out. And when they played when she played the Prodigy theme, I got emotional. And
Is the Prodigy theme for Kate Mulgrew "Smack My Bitch Up"? Because that seems offensive.
No. Anyways, on that note, but I will say it was super nerdy, but this guy did get super emotional watching Kate Mulgrew go to the Captain Janeway statue for the first time.
I like it.
It's very emotional for that. So everybody should watch Prodigy, and that'll be the next Star Trek episode that I do with Issa and Sarah. So that'll be coming up soon because Prodigy's halfway through season 1.2 because they split up the first season into 10 because the animation took longer than they expected.
That's what it was.
No, whatever.
Hey, and no, Prodigy is great. It's great Star Trek. It's great Star Trek. So, all right. On that note, thanks for joining me, guys. And we'll talk again soon. So, may the force be with you and all that shit.